Okay, I would like to call to order the 135th meeting of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission in one of our regular venues, the Hine Convention Center in Boston, at about 10:35. Commissioner Cameron will be here shortly, and we will go ahead and get started. I do want to make one personal comment before we begin the rest of the meeting, and I think I'll read it. Before we begin, I want to clarify my renewed status as a participating member of the Mass Gaming Commission. As you know, I have for the past several months recused myself from any and all deliberations on the license award for Region A. That decision is now made, so my recusal is completed. I have total confidence in the work that the four commissioners did to arrive at that conclusion, and I look forward to working with them to implement that decision effectively. I will remain recused from issues, if any arise, pertaining to the land transaction in Everett. And of course, we will remain alert to any other residual matters arising from the Region A decision. If issues do arise, they will be considered by us on a case-by-case basis. So I'm glad to be back. We'll start out with the approval of the minutes. Item 2, Commissioner McHugh.
The minutes of, could I get some live mic here, please? The minute,
How quickly they forget.
they do.
McHugh who?
Right. Thank you. The minutes are in the book, Mr. Chairman, and I would move their acceptance as they appear there with the usual reservation of rights to change and fix typographical and other mechanical errors.
You have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it 4-0. Next up is item 3, Administration, Executive Director Day. If we come up to anything, oh, here's Commissioner Cameron, so never mind. Executive Director Day.
Good morning, Chairman Crosby, Commissioners.
Morning.
Good morning.
As we begin this morning, I have a couple of informational items before we move into the administrative topics. The Commission's project monitoring regulation and guidelines are designed to ensure a licensee's commitment, like those particularly in the RFA 2s, are tracked and continue to be part of the project. However, as projects are actually developed, changes are often reasonable. In order to accommodate these changes, we use a variance process which allows the licensee, PENN in this case, to ask for a variance when circumstances reasonably support a deviation from the commitment. If the request is a minor change, I approve and notify the Commission. If the request is a major change, I would bring it back before the Commission. So far, I've approved 2 variances for PENN, one of which has been discussed by the Commission and allows PENN to move the sports bar onto the casino floor, and a second removes a proposed video feed of the gaming floor to the Plainville Police Department. Video of a gaming floor is provided to the gaming agency by regulation, and in this matter, Plainville Chief has been contacted and has no objection to the change. So my long-winded purpose is to notify you that I've considered and approved 2 variances and to make sure you know what they are.
Okay.
I'd also like to note that our licensing division has received 6 gaming vendor primary applications at this point, and 51 primary qualifiers that go with those applications. And there's, of course, other.
Are you responsible for that?
I believe in the appropriate background. Thunderous. Our licensing division now has 6 gaming vendor primary applications and 51 primary qualifiers. Along with those, the total fees at this point to the Commission for processing is $121,300. Should also note, as the way of future work as things are moving forward, the licensing process is, and our licensing team has been in discussion with 10 other potential primary applications.
What was that figure you just mentioned, 123,000?
121,300,
Of
give or
what?
take.
Pages or?
Dollars.
Okay, thanks.
Licensing fee dollars. That's 2 general sections, notes I just wanted to make this morning. And the next 2 items, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, that are on your agenda continues the Commission's process of developing a new policy structure and completing an independent review of our finance and administration's policies and practices. Both, first topic up will be Ed Burke is here again to report on our project, our high-performance project, and request approval of 11 new policies. And then secondly, Derek Lennon and his finance and division team will come forward with the independent review that the Commission requested of our financial policies. So with that, unless the Commission has questions of me, I'm certainly defer to Ed.
Okay. Welcome.
Good morning, Chairman Crosby, Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here again. I'm joined by Joan Kuhn, who is our subject matter expert on matters to do with human resources. This morning we have 11 policies, which are the final new policies that are being developed. If you recall, we had 3 categories. There were existing policies that were in the employee handbook. Those are in the process of being reformatted and annotated, updated for the new policy handbook. There are existing state policies, which we include by reference. But there were 30 or so new policies that we needed to develop from scratch. This is the last batch of those that we'll bring before you. This work has been, there is a presentation here which we can go through very quickly. In your packets, you'll see the presentation. There's also a checklist of all the policies, kind of a scorecard, if you will, of where we are. The detailed policies themselves are both in the appendix. I won't spend much time on the workflow as we've already gone through it before. Suffice it to say that there's a detailed process that we go through before policies make it to this level. Joan and I work very closely with Human Resources Manager Trupti Banda, who is with us here, and her assistant Dean Ventola, and the high performance team, which includes Commissioners Cameron and Zuniga, Executive Director Day, General Counsel Blue, Chief Finance and Accounting Officer Lennon, and Executive Assistant Dooley have also been through all of these policies before we bring them here. So without further ado, unless there are questions, I think we can start going through the policies themselves. Okay. This week, or this meeting, as a change in pace, we actually have the policies that are in the presentation, which is the executive summary, in the same order as the policies that are in the detailed
Nice.
packet. So hopefully that will assist your ability to follow along. The first one deals with voluntary termination. This basically codifies the steps to be taken when an employee in good standing decides to leave MGC for any reason. It basically lays out their responsibilities and the steps that the Mass Gaming Commission will take to complete the process.
I had a couple of quick questions on the voluntary termination policy. First of all, actually, it's only one. I take that back. There's a bullet in the policy statement page about notification of less than 2 or 4 weeks as appropriate may result in ineligibility for rehire. Why couldn't we just kind of narrow that down to 2 weeks?
We have 2 different categories. We have managers and exempt managers who we're requiring to give 4 weeks' notice.
Okay.
And then all other rank and file giving 2 weeks' notice. So that's why this is split that way.
Okay.
Others on this item? I just had a quick one. It was bullet point says pay at termination is at the sole discretion of the MGC. What does that mean?
There's sometimes when somebody gives their notice, you'd like them to leave sooner rather than later. And you might choose to give them 2 weeks in lieu of to just move along. So it's leaving it to the MGC to decide, would we like this person to leave, and by leaving now rather than the 2 weeks notice they gave, would we like to give them 2 weeks pay? But it's your discretion. You might say no.
Okay.
We'd like you to leave now.
So I don't, did anybody else understand that's what that said?
Well, we had.
You've
we
talked
had-
about it.
Yeah,
Okay.
we have.
I would just rewrite it so it says that. I didn't know that's what it said.
Okay,
Okay.
Severance as an alternative or something or other, just so that it's clear.
okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, any other questions on voluntary termination? Very good. The next one is for internal transfer. This policy deals with a variety of circumstances which may arise in terms of an individual within the commission changing positions. One of the key aspects of this is the intention that internal promotions will be something that MGC encourages. In other words, we want to develop a career path for individuals working here. Very often, the best candidate for a new position is someone who's already on board with the Mass Gaming Commission. It also deals with lateral transfers and occasionally demotions, which may occur for a variety of reasons. So this basically lays out, again, the policies and procedures to be followed for those transfers.
I had one question on this policy. The employee needs to notify their manager within 30-day notice, and during that 30-day period, they can be called upon to assist with onboarding and training of whoever the successor is. We've quickly found out, and maybe there's flexibility in the policy, that bringing somebody on new into our commission staff never takes 30 days. But just giving our policy some flexibility for that person to be able to come back beyond that 30-day and help out with an employee's recruitment and onboarding orientation would be helpful. I just don't want to see us limited to that 30-day window, because when you think of screening, hiring, recruiting, going through a background check, it never gets done in 30 days.
Right.
Okay, I think that's a good observation. The 30 days was, there were multiple reasons for that. One of them was to make sure that the manager of the person in their existing position was aware that this discussion was going on and that they might be moving. But you're right, the other aspect was to be looking at the onboarding process in terms of filling that recommendation, and I think that's a good addition.
And I think that actually it would be good in this case if the managers work together, because they're new into a new department as well, so you don't want them like 50-50 of their time as they're kind of learning their new job.
Right.
So,
It was more for flexibility purposes and
Yeah.
just realizing a 30-day window may not work.
Okay?
Anything else? All right.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
sorry.
just had, and this is a broader comment than just this particular policy, but it applies to this one. We, when we top out, are going to be 150 people. We're all going to know each other's names, hopefully. We're going to be integrated. It's probably too much to hope that we'll know everybody's names all the time, because there'll be some turnover. We're going to know the strengths and capabilities of a lot of the workers. Things are going to open up and they're going to change. It's conceivable to me that a couple of managers see in a particular employee a fit that isn't working particularly well in one place and a need in another place that, given the skills that that person has, would be a better fit for that person and for the organization. And cabining things, to the degree they're cabined in this policy and quite frankly in many others, strikes me as probably necessary if you're 500, 600, 700 people, big organization. But I wonder if we're not creating a structure that is more rigid than we need it to be for the kind of organization that we are and look to become. So I just put that out there for a brief discussion. I know you've all given careful thought to that, but it struck me here that the steps and the procedures and who initiates what and how long is left and the like really may not may not fit the kind of organization, at least I hope we become, as we move down the road.
I would suggest one reason to have a policy, even if you're a smaller organization, is you always want to have the perception and the reality to your employees that you're being fair. And sometimes, and I would agree that people see different things in people and say this might be a better fit. And I think there's ways around that. This is looking more at, I'm looking at a job posting and I see something that I like and I'd like to go forward with it. I think there's always kind of going to be behind the scenes discussions between managers about this person is really smart in this area and not so good where they sit now. Can we talk about that? I don't think that this precludes that, but I think you do want to, even in a small organization, make sure that your processes seem fair.
Oh, I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that. All right, well,
Well, does anybody else rise to that issue?
No, I think structure's a good thing, and I think people like to know how they go about that next step. And when the structure isn't there, people are left to think, well, I know how the person got the job, and I know you weren't taking it to that extreme, Commissioner, but I think even at our level, a structure like this is helpful.
I do agree with Commissioner McHugh's point, which applies to this policy but permeates through others at a big picture level. I think as we now get into the additional focus of building the organization, that's something that has been building the regulatory framework is something that has been also in my mind. What is that? Balance and level, and what is that? What does the organization look like a year or two, or on a steady state? So I take your point, and I agree. Something I don't know exactly what that means to this particular page, this one policy, but it's something that's been on my mind. I still haven't wrapped around my head around the 150 people. Just to just to put that note. By some measures it seems like a lot, but it may be the right number. I don't know. We'll figure that out.
I think when you're a regional organization as well, which we will be, we will have offices in different parts of the state, the structure is important. Because you can end up with a situation where something is being done in one part of the state one way and differently in another due to the individual manager who may prefer something else. And I just have seen instances where that lack of, the lack of structure, or those who don't follow it, it can create a real problem in an organization.
no, I hear that, and I understand that, and I appreciate it. And you've certainly had experience with a statewide organization that has managerial levels at multiple levels, so I take your point and your experience. And I'm going to bring up a couple of other instances in a minute as we proceed of examples of things without having an answer for the problem, just a hope and a thought that we want this to be an organization that is fair. We want it to be an organization that's high performing. That's why we're on this. But we also want it to be an organization that is really an attractive place to work. Mm-hmm. And those things go to make it an attractive place to work. But there's a sort of a personal touch, a true team sense that I think we need to cultivate and keep in mind that we want to cultivate as well. And it is sometimes the formality that embedded in process that can be off-putting in that sense. So, as I say, I don't have any answers. I just raised the issue.
Well, as you know, I've been very sympathetic to that perspective. you know, in addition to being certainly fair and in addition to adhering to high-performance best practice standards of an organization, we want to be able to be nimble, we want to be informal, we want to be flexible, and merging those two can be difficult. Furthermore, when you set up a standard throughout this, not just this page, but the entire set of personnel policies, once they're on paper, you're supposed to adhere to them, and it's darn hard to adhere to them. If you look at all these steps that are supposed to be taken in writing and this, that, and the other thing, it's hard to do, and that which sets up its own set of problems, or of issues and challenges. I sort of felt like we had that ship has kind of sailed. I mean, we've sort of made the commitment that we are going to adhere to what are bureaucratically respected best practices for a high-performance public management organization. And with that will come a certain degree of formality and rigor and, to a certain extent, bureaucracy that maybe some of us are less than perfectly comfortable with, but we had kind of decided that's the kind of organization we're going to be, and we're going to figure out. Now, this is going to put, you know, we are this weird organization. We don't run this organization. We're the commissioners. Rick runs the organization, and his directors run the organization, and it puts a lot of pressure on our executive director and our directors to adopt management practices that implement all of this, and that's a challenge. But, so having said all that, I'm sympathetic to the sort of visceral feeling about it, but I also think we've made a decision, and, you know, for the very most part, these are standard, respectable, important steps for high-quality organizations to take, so let's go with it.
I don't think it's one or the other. I don't think because you have policies and procedures, you can be less than nimble, you can be bureaucratic overly. I would like our policies to be straightforward. That's why I think it's important, if someone doesn't understand it, that we make sure it is clear. So that's a really important piece. They do not have to be overly complicated, and I know that that is the case, which is, we've done a lot of work on less complicated policies, pretty straightforward. And I think the other piece we get to here is leadership. We're looking at directors who we want to be people-friendly, who we really want to implement these policies in a way that people feel like they understand, they have a fair opportunity, that there is dialogue. So I think one doesn't exclude the other, and the most important piece is the structure is fine, but the people are the most important piece.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately the only solution, but I do think we need to keep thinking about the larger atmospheric issue as we go forward and as we implement these things going down the road, which I'm not saying anything that everybody doesn't agree with. Yeah. So I'll just shut up and let us go on.
Well, I think it's a fair point. Echoing what Commissioner Cameron said, I think that's exactly the balance that we're trying to achieve. We've had a lot of very thoughtful discussions at the high performance team level. A number of policies we've decided to defer, not to put in concrete, because we want more flexibility. Whenever you're dealing with a contract or a criminal law or any number of things where you're creating a structure, a legal structure for how you're working, it is by its nature kind of seems to be relatively inflexible, relatively cast in concrete. But in fact, we hope that these provide just a basis for how people act, and that there's much more that goes on beyond that. You know, in terms of internal transfers, we would hope that there's regular ongoing discussions among the management team, so they'll know if a person is looking at going to another job, and they don't have to refer to the policy to say, oh, well, we need 30 days notice or what have you. We're going to be talking about performance evaluation in just a moment. That's another one where if you're just, as a manager, looking at the letter of the law, saying, okay, I'm going to meet twice a year, I'm going to create these documents and put them in the file, that doesn't make a person a good and effective leader. There should be significant interaction beyond that, hopefully daily, two-way communication. How are things going? What do we need to work on? How are we connecting to the objectives of the organization? And that's a lot of the rest of this project, when we get into performance management and strategy development, will deal with, if you will, those aspects of leadership that help provide that balance.
Okay, great. Let's
Other
keep going.
questions? Okay. The next one is workplace privacy. Basically, the purpose of this is it lays out a number of the key things in terms of email and equipment and other things that employees of the MGC will have access to and be given access to by the commission, and it basically establishes that there should not be an expectation of privacy. That this is a workplace. These are tools and office space and what have you that are being given to you in order to accomplish your job. But it is not personal property. It is not something that email, for example, where you have an expectation that whatever's in there is private.
The first bullet says employees may only use MGC-issued keys and locks to secure MGC property. I take it that's an aid of this no privacy concept. But suppose I just wanted to lock up my lunch. Couldn't I do that? Do we really need that bullet, in other words?
I would say that you do. I would say that if you allow people to, say you wanted to lock up your lunch in the bottom drawer of your desk and you brought in your own key, and we were very concerned that there was something in there beyond your lunch because of a variety of things that occurred over time, that you've made that yours.
Oh, no, I understand that, but this says may only use MGC-issued keys and locks to secure MGC. Oh, I see. I could lock up my lunch with an MGC key.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay, all right, okay. Okay. Okay.
And lunches have disappeared, so it's
Got
probably
it,
a good idea.
Got it, okay.
But it's there's usually a positive reason for this
No,
too.
I understand it now.
Okay.
I'm not sure that's,
Would a wording change
yeah,
make it clear?
I just suggest you think about the wording of that, because I read it as you could only use MGC locks and keys to secure MGC property. You couldn't secure your personal property with an MGC key in a MGC facility. Okay.
Okay.
All right, we can work on that. I think, the best example would be putting a lock on a file
Right.
cabinet,
No, I get
and somebody
it.
else needs to get into the file cabinet.
Right.
Would be a
Maybe
problem.
we just need to delete the second MGC in this sentence.
Okay,
Oh, that's a good idea.
Good get.
that works. Good.
Great.
Other questions?
Right.
Okay, the next one is compensation. This policy lays out a whole series of specific codicils based on different aspects of compensation. It connects to the Equal Pay Act and other federal and state statutes as it relates to compensation. And essentially just kind of lays out where to go if there are any issues or complaints. There are contact points below. And essentially just makes it clear to employees how this will work.
Okay.
Okay? Similarly, the next one is on pay practices. This gets into some of the specifics in terms of exempt and non-exempt employees. It refers to the Family Medical Leave Act, the Fair Labor Standards Act, and other state and federal guidelines that must be adhered to as part of pay practices. Deals with vacation, personal days, sick time, and things like that.
Commissioners? These are just details, but the non-exempt employees refers to 40 hours a week. Is that meant to be 37 and a half?
It is 37 and a half. That is their work week.
But on the non-exempt, in my version,
I'm
it
sorry.
says 40, right?
Is that for
Oh,
calculation of
no,
overtime?
it is. You don't actually go into overtime till after you're 40. So if you stayed till 39 hours, you'd be still paid straight time. It's
So you
not-
don't get any overtime for your
but
first 2.5
not-
hours of
no.
overtime?
I mean, you can, that would be a decision you could make, but the law only says it's at 40 that it kicks in.
Okay.
That's the FSLA is 40 hours, that's the
Yes.
point of that, right?
Yes.
So the statutory mandate cuts in at 40 hours.
Okay.
We could cut it in at 37 and a half if we wanted.
The other one is, as long as we're going to do this, we should just make sure this is right, but it says normal business hours, 8:45 to 5, that's 9 hours and 15 minutes. Then it says you have a 45-minute non-paid lunch break, that would take you down to 7.5 hours, not 7, is it, it's supposed to be, is it 7.5 is right?
Right.
Is that the right daily, okay, fine,
7.5,
all right. Scratch that. Next.
Okay. You're on
Okay.
to performance evaluation?
Okay, performance evaluation. This policy, basically, I was using this as an example a moment ago. This lays out kind of the minimum expectations required for performance counseling for managers to their direct reports. It lays out the timing when evaluations are due. It includes a self-evaluation process for all individuals in the organization. This is one in particular where, as we get into the performance management aspects of the project, we will be building a structure on top of this as a way of cascading the overall goals and metrics of the organization down to the individual level, which we found to have actually very positive benefits from a team building and a motivation standpoint around the state. People like to know that this is the key thing that they should be accomplished, and this is how we're going to measure it, and this is how it ties in with the overall goals of the commission. But for our purposes, this lays out the policy in terms of kind of the foundation for what our eventual performance process will be.
Okay,
Any questions?
good.
Nope. Okay, the next one is harassment-free workplace. This basically lays out, what the policy will be regarding any type of harassment for any number of reasons which are delineated here in terms of specific protected status. Again, this ties to a number of federal and state guidelines and puts MGC into compliance with those.
Okay,
Questions? Nope. Similarly, workplace bullying basically just sets out an expectation that bullying will not be tolerated within the Mass Gaming Commission. It provides definitions in terms of what constitutes bullying and lays out a procedure in terms of reporting and dealing with incidents that should arise, should they arise.
this is one of the policies that puts an affirmative duty on people to do things that they may not know they're really supposed to do. Where your first bullet point is employees who are the subject of bullying, that's one thing. Witness workplace bullying or view actions that may lead to work must bring their concerns to their manager. I assume that's the right word because you've thought that through, but I think there's a training element here. Again, this is a place where we're setting up a standard that we are all expected to adhere to, and it's not necessarily intuitive or common practice or experiential that it be done. So things like this that create affirmative duties on people need to be in a training program, but quick, once these things are adopted.
Agreed.
Okay?
Other questions? Okay, the next one is a violence-free workplace. Again, this lays out the policies for MGC with respect to that. It reflects the Mass Executive Order 442, which requires all state agencies to have in place a violence-free workplace policy. It creates definitions of what is considered workplace violence and the procedures for dealing with any cases that should arise.
Okay?
Okay?
Yep.
Workplace relationships. This deals with dating in the workplace, lays out the policy of the Mass Gaming Commission in terms of how this works. In some organizations, dating is prohibited. That is not the case here. So this basically lays out the expectations for, appropriate conduct and how to deal with instances where you have a supervisory relationship, for example, where there might be an issue with an ongoing relationship.
Why isn't it prohibited here?
Excuse me?
Why isn't it prohibited here? There was a policy choice.
There is a policy
Yeah,
choice. The
and so
choice
what-
was to go in this direction.
I guess I would leave that to Executive Director Day, maybe, or one of the
Yeah.
commissioners.
I think what's important here with work, I think we've all been in the workplace enough to know that this occurs. What's important here is the supervisory position in the workplace. For example, if you had I don't know, let's say a gaming agent in one location dating a gaming agent in another location, there's no supervisory issue. Frankly, there's no issue as far as I'm concerned. When it becomes an issue is in a supervisory position, and that's the immediate report piece here, and from my perspective anyway, it would be a situation where we, kind of quietly just move one of those folks so that there's not a reporting, a supervisory piece there. So I think that's how most organizations handle this matter that I'm aware of.
And I think the other thing is, even if it's coworkers who are dating, that's perfectly fine. And it's a performance issue if they bring their squabbles into the workplace. So it does kind of address that. We're not saying that's where a lot of people meet their partners, is in the workplace. So I think saying prohibited is a little more draconian than I would suggest. If you're doing that, you're actually going to end up potentially losing some good employees. If
Commissioners?
it's uncovered.
I think the idea is kind of summarized in the first bullet, which says, employees are expected to conduct themselves in an appropriate workplace manner while on MGC property that does not interfere with their coworkers' ability to perform their duties. I think what we had is a little discussion about the concept of how far we go interjecting ourselves into situations with employees. In this case, if we're talking about, as I have seen it both ways, there's no question. I've seen it, agencies which prohibit it, agencies which have a policy more similar to this, and from a practical basis, I think this framework allows us to apply it more clearly than it does in the other situations.
Okay, I get that, but what about a flat prohibition on superior-subordinate dating relationships?
Right, that's all we're talking about.
This has, no, I was talking
you're
about
talking-
something broader.
Oh, you were
But
talking about something.
I was.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
But I get it, I get it. But the fourth bullet says if we have a superior-subordinate dating relationship, then we'll try and work it out. So again, there's a policy choice there. Why not a statement that superior-subordinate dating relationships are not permissible, and if they arise, we'll try and work it out, but at least create the expectation that they're not permissible. That's where the greatest danger, both to, I'm not saying anything anybody doesn't know. That's where the greatest danger lies from a whole host of standpoints, including morale.
Agreed. I think that this policy basically establishes that where there is a supervisory relationship, it is not acceptable, and some adjustments need to be made in terms of reporting relationships, or where they are in the organization, including perhaps one of them leaving the organization.
Okay, so if that is pretty much, if that's a given, then should the fourth bullet say that in straightforward fashion, and then go on to say the rest of the stuff? So that there is not an expectation that there are exceptions to a no subordinate superior dating relationship rule.
Are you saying that it's prohibited, or if it occurs, it must be reported immediately, and then there will be a change in the in the situation where one does not report to the other.
Well, certainly the latter,
Yeah.
but that needs, it seems to me that needs to be, it seems to me that I don't know, I don't want to get into the detail. You know this better than I. But it seems to me that if we're agreed that a dating relationship in a hierarchical sense is not going to be permitted in the organization, we ought to say that in some way, shape, or form in that bullet, so that there's not an expectation that it'll work in some circumstances, it won't work in other circumstances. If it happens, we'll get around and we'll think about it, and we'll figure out what to do about it. I guess that's my point.
Then I can take another stab at kind of rewriting that to capture your point.
Okay, if my
But that's
colleagues agree.
That's a policy change, right, what you're talking about? You're
No, I think it's clarifying something that I think was meant to be addressed here. Perhaps we didn't
So you,
capture it.
all right.
Right.
So you see it as the same?
Yeah, I don't,
Okay,
I
fine.
don't see
Okay,
this
fine.
as particularly different. I see where you'd like it a little more concrete.
I would just like it more concrete, so we don't set up a false expectation that this can happen and then hurt and anger and mistrust when we don't work out a policy that allows the workplace and personal relationship to coexist.
That's fine. I would make 2 points here. One, this is, in many of the policies we are applying federal and state laws, executive orders, and things like that. This is a case where it's management prerogative. It is really up to you which way you want to, you and the management of MGC as a whole, which way you want to go with this. I guess the second point I would make, my observation would be in cases where it's prohibited, in organizations where workplace relationships are prohibited, they still happen. And it creates all sorts of issues. In this case, I think it's, I prefer having kind of a sunshine law on it, saying, okay, we know what's going to happen. If it happens, it's fine as long as it stays out of the workplace. It doesn't impact how you're acting here. But it is inappropriate in a supervisory relationship, and I think what you're asking for is to strengthen that wording, and I'm sure we can do that.
Just so people have a clear expectation that there will be a change in that reporting structure.
right.
There is no, we think it's okay here, we don't think it's okay here.
So we're not going to have a wait and see, yeah.
Correct. It is, there will be a change in the reporting relationship. One, it's unacceptable for a subordinate and a manager to be in a relationship and have that structure continue as far as that reporting.
I think that's clear. It starts off with the direction that this relationship is prohibited,
Just
and it goes
to-
from there.
I agree on this clarification is good, just, might be probably better to if you make the language clear but non-punitive, because as you said, it happens.
Right.
And we don't want to scare people into not going along with the second part, which is, all right, if it happens, we'll talk about it and fix it. So try to not make it.
Rather than say it's prohibited, if it occurs, it has to be reported immediately, and everyone knows that there will be a change in, it doesn't mean it has to happen publicly, by the way, but there will be a change in that reporting relationship, if that can be accommodated, by the way. If it's a unique
Well, the change might be
situation.
if somebody leaves. That's a change in the.
Well, correct, either it's
Yeah.
someone
Right.
leaves or someone is transferred. Clearly, though, everyone will know that what's unacceptable is to continue on in that reporting relationship with a subordinate.
And that seems to be the problem that might be unclear, is that, because the last sentence does take care of that. A reasonable solution cannot be agreed upon by the HR and the manager with input from the director, so forth, may elect to transfer or terminate the manager or employee solely dependent on the business needs of MGC. So that basically puts that decision in the hands of the agency, saying that's just not going to work. You need to make these changes. I think the problem is it doesn't really firmly say that the practice itself is not acceptable, or however we want to say it.
I don't know that we want to say that, because then we're encouraging people to hide and not report. If in fact, what I would hope to happen is if something like that starts to happen, okay, we know the rules, we can't be in this, I can't continue to be your boss, kind of a thing. So everybody knows that, and right away that issue gets handled. If you say it's prohibited, I think you
I agree
force
with...
that underground.
I agree. It's not prohibited. It just is going to result in a change, and
Yes.
everybody
Yes.
needs to know
Correct.
that a change is going to occur.
Yes.
And that needs to be said straightforwardly so that that conversation can occur
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
between the pair.
I will give it a new rewrite.
Okay,
Good.
next.
Okay, the last one is weapons-free workplace. Again, this deals with bringing weapons into any MGC facility. It lays out exceptions to that rule, which would be law enforcement, others who are licensed and approved by MGC to carry firearms.
Okay, great. So do we need a vote?
I think we have in the past.
I think we
Yes.
have. Yes,
Yes, we have.
Commissioner Cameron?
Yeah, I move that we accept all of the 11 workplace policies just detailed,
As detailed.
as detailed, yes.
Second? Commissioner Zia?
As
amended.
As amended.
Oh, correct, with the amendments.
Second.
Sure, second. And may I say that some of these, although we are adopting them as new policies, there were statements in the prior employee manual. What we've done in a couple of policies here is really codify them, structure them. Some are entirely new, as discussed here, but others were statements that we already had in place, like the expectation of privacy, for example, or the no expectation of privacy.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Commissioners.
Director Day.
Mr. Chairman, that gets us to CFAO Derek Lennon and the financial policy reports.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good to see you again. I have the pleasure today of being joined by members of the MGC Finance and Administration Office, well as two gentlemen from the Kahn, Litwin, and Renza, KLR, public accounting and auditing firm. I'd like to do formal introductions. We have the bios of the KLR team up on the screen. Henry Silver is the director of KLR's Emerging Business Group, who's directly to my right. And then we have Michael Medeiros, who's an audit supervisor and basically headed up this engagement. He was in with us quite frequently on MGC property, going through our records, going through our policies. And then from MGC, we have Trupti Bander, our HR director, Dean Ventola, our HR business manager, Maria Batari, our revenue manager, Agnes Bollier, our budget and accounts payable manager, and Joanne Shea, our finance specialist. The KLR and MGC members here put in a great deal of time to review our current processes as well as provide information to the team to develop this work product. And I also wanted to take this opportunity to reintroduce you or to recognize the MGC A&F team. They are the group that keeps our day-to-day operations, our back office running. You hardly ever see them unless there's a problem. So I just wanted to recognize them, let you see the team again.
And that's why we almost never see them.
Because we
good
never have problems, right.
So just quickly, and I'll turn it over to the KLR team. You asked us to do an independent review of our finance processes, see how we're doing, our policies. We identified early on that while we have years of finance experience, being thrown into the mix so quickly that our group, a lot of it wasn't written down and documented. So what we did was, we went out and solicited quotes from a statewide contract. The contract number is PRF 56. It's a contract for security compliance and audits, as well as PCI audits, payment card industry standard auditing. We're looking for a firm to review the current finance internal systems and operations, policies and processes, and we're looking for compliance with the state comptroller's financial and security policies, as well as state finance law. The areas we asked to be looked at were contracting and contract processing, revenue receipt and reconciliations, invoice receipt and payments, budgetary controls, payroll and personnel processing, securing personal data, in compliance with PCI standards, since we're going to have a licensing system that will be accepting credit card payments. We're looking for the successful bidder to draft our policies and processes where they weren't written down, and make recommendations for improvements to our current processes where they saw risks. Compass ITC was the firm selected. They're on the statewide contract, and they brought in KLR, the public accounting firm, as a subcontractor to look at the 5 areas that are going to be in front of you today. The security standards and securing personal data will come back with our CIO, John Glennon, at a later date. But today, they're going to go over our contracting, our revenue, our invoice, our budgeting, and our payroll processes. So with that, I'll turn it over to Henry Silva.
Good morning, Chairman Crosby and fellow commissioners. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you this morning. Just by way of background, I'm a shareholder at the firm of Conn Litwin Renza. It's a 200-plus person firm based in Providence, Rhode Island, with offices in Boston, Waltham, Cambridge, and also Newport, Rhode Island. We have extensive experience with gaming, having done significant work with establishments in Rhode Island and in Connecticut. I've been with the firm for a number of years, and I have 25-plus years of experience in the area of internal control systems development, design, and evaluation. Our firm was retained to perform a review of the current finance internal systems and operations for compliance with the Office of the State Comptroller, Financial and Securities Policies, as well as a review of the MGC's financial policies and processes for conformance with the annual internal control questionnaire issued by the Office of the State Comptroller. We performed this assessment of the current policy systems and processes in use, and then made certain recommendations to the MGC team for stronger policies and systems where we felt were warranted. Following this assessment, we recommended additional systems and helped them develop policies and processes working with the financial staff at MGC to mitigate any weaknesses or vulnerabilities that we identified during our assessment. These policies, processes, and systems developed and recommended were based on best practices and industry standards. I believe you all have a copy of our report, and we're able to review that in advance of this meeting. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Medeiros, who is a supervisor at the firm, who headlined the project under my direct supervision and direction.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
So I guess I just give a brief overview of what we did and the processes and procedures. As Derek alluded to, there were 5 main areas we focused on as recommended by MGC. Area one was contracting and contract processing. Area number 2 was revenue receipt and reconciliations. Area number 3 was invoice receipt and payments. Area number 4, budgetary controls. And area number 5, payroll and personnel. So with those 5 areas I just listed, we performed basically 6 procedures on each area. So for each area, we first, procedure number 1, discussed with the appropriate MGC personnel the current process in place as the date of our work performed. Procedure number 2, we performed a walkthrough of the process to gain a further understanding. Procedure number 3, we wrote a detailed narrative of the current process and internal controls. Procedure number 4, we provided a draft of the detailed narrative to MGC for review and comments. Procedure number 5, we compared the current policies with the requirements of the Comptroller of the Commonwealth. And procedure number 6, we informed MGC of any items that do not meet the requirements of the Comptroller of the Commonwealth and any other internal controls identified that should be improved. So now going, I guess, a little more in depth to the 6 procedures. The first one we discussed was discussed with the appropriate personnel the current process in place as the date of field work. So how we basically started is we actually had I guess a kickoff meeting, you could say, going over the overall accounting system and kind of a high-level approach of the people involved, the processes in place. And that was performed with the CFAO himself and the finance managers. And then once we had that meeting, we came back to our office, we went through, compiled the policies that we did have from the state and had a better understanding of where to attack. And then we came back and we actually met separately with members of each area to develop an understanding. So for each area, the people we spoke with most, keep in mind that we spoke with a variety of people, but these were the leads on certain areas. For the first area, contracting, contract processing, we met primarily with Agnes, the financial manager on the AP side, Derek, the CFAO, and Maria, the finance manager on the receivable side. For the revenue receipt and reconciliations process, we met primarily with the finance manager on the receivable side, and also members of the licensing department, and that was the licensing supervisor and the licensing specialist. As far as invoice receipt and payments, the two people we spoke with most there were the finance manager on the AP side and the CFAO as well. And then as far as budgetary controls, it was primarily the CFAO and the finance manager on the AP side again. And last but not least, our fifth area was payroll and personnel, and that was primarily with the HR manager. So our second step, once we actually understood, documented the controls and discussed with them, we performed a walkthrough of the process to gain a further understanding. So what a walkthrough is in non-accounting terms, it's if someone says doing a control, we actually go through and follow the control through their paperwork or the steps or signatures or whatever is needed to make sure what is being said is actually being done. So we did that for most of the key controls throughout the process. So the third procedure we performed, once we discussed with them, did our walkthroughs, and then had ongoing conversations with them, we ended up putting together a detailed narrative of the current process and internal controls. Once we had that compiled, we gave our first draft to MGC for review and comments. Met with the staff, we went over it. We had another meeting of many to go over any differences we might have had and any recommendations, and from there. After that, they gave us back a draft, went back and forth a couple times. Then we had a final draft to work with. And this brings us to our fifth procedure, which is compare the current policies with the requirements of the Comptroller of the Commonwealth. So we went through and found every resource we could basically find. I'll give you the most ones we use most frequently, majority of which are off the mass.gov website or the Mass Gaming's website. So some of the policies we looked at are the Office of the Comptroller Internal Control Guide, which is available on the mass.gov website, the Annual Internal Control Questionnaire from the State Comptroller, the most recent policies issued by the Office of the Comptroller, and those are all online on the mass.gov website in the Guidance for Agencies section. A number of those policies, some of the most important ones we looked at were the Expenditure Classification Handbook. There was as well the State Finance Law and General Requirements, which is issued by the Comptroller's Office and the OSD, Operational Services Division. And then you had a number of policies, the Acquisition Policy, Bill Payment Policy, Cash Reconciliation Policy, and so on. Obviously, we used the Mass Gaming Commission website. And then another useful tool we found was the National Association of State Comptrollers, the NASC, Internal Control Self-Assessment Tools. So this is a number of checklists which are basically used to assist in determining whether the proper controls are in place for various businesses, processes, which should be evaluated for application under the user's unique circumstances. This was very important because this kind of had a checklist of what we were looking for. And keep in mind that this was made for organizations of varying sizes. Obviously, MGC is a growing organization, so we kind of looked at in a high-level approach. And also comparable clients, as Henry alluded to, that we have seen before, and the cost typical from our experience, industry standard and best practices of what could be implemented or recommended. As far as the 5 areas, as you can see on the slide here, we did put together, for each area we had our own little narrative like this. And overall, throughout the whole process, MGC was well aware and understood the weaknesses that we discussed. And also, they're well aware of the need to improve, and obviously it's a growing organization, and there is increased activity that happened over time. And even throughout this process that we went through, there were moving pieces. As you can see earlier, the payroll side, everything's a work in process. So we did keep that in mind. And a big thing in accounting words is segregations of duties, and that can always be improved. And that basically is having different people involved in the process to kind of spread the risk, you could say. And initially, it wasn't limited, but the plan is to grow into it and improve controls over time, and of course, it's with resources and as activity and things pile up. As far as each area, I guess I can go through briefly some of the high-level recommendations we had, which are primarily based off the NASC internal control checklist they had.
Excuse me, just,
Yep.
we've read we've all read it. So
Okay.
just, the things that any of you think were really, really significant that need to be brought out in a public meeting like this, that's what you should focus on,
Okay.
just to make sure we keep moving.
Yeah, I guess I'll give an example just to keep it moving as a recommendation. Obviously, feel free to ask questions. Basically, they were all surrounded around segregations of duties. The first one I can look at right here was, responsibility for billing for services and fees should be segregated for those from collection and accounting. Currently, the receivables manager was overseeing all this. And of course, we sat down and they had an appropriate response. So for each recommendation we discussed a response and, a way to strengthen it with the team. And his response for this case was the area manager will generate the invoices and the CFAO will electronically approve the invoices in Mars on a weekly basis. On a monthly basis, the receivables manager will generate an accounts receivable report for all activity that occurred in the prior month that will be signed off by both the CFO and the commission treasurer. So I guess the point I'm trying to get at is that we had the recommendations and there was a process in place and responses to go through.
Excuse me, you mentioned that these, that most of the issues were in the area of segregating functions, right?
Yep.
And where you would identified issues, which I gather you did and you worked them out, was it typically just because this is a very small new organization and it's hard, you don't have enough people to segregate? Or was there anything chronic or systematic in misthinking it? Or was it merely, being a small new organization?
Yeah, it's.
Let me just address that, absolutely. The case, given the fact that the organization is new with limited number of resources in terms of personnel, you're going to typically have situations
Right.
where there aren't, appropriate segregations of duties that we would like in the accounting world. And given that, we worked very closely with the team to develop procedures that would mitigate that risk, given the size of the organization. So we were very, very comfortable after meeting with them in the proposed corrections to those issues. We were very comfortable with that.
Yeah, and going further with that, inherent in the State Department, there's a lot of checks and balances in place already with the Econo system and, the contract procurement system. So even though there were limited staff, as we could say in the beginning, that it's growing, there were checks and balances throughout inherent in the systems they use.
Right. Okay, good. So I don't think we need to go through each one of those, but that, if the way you've characterized that, I think is perfectly understandable, and we're totally comfortable with that. Anything else that was significant in any way, recurring?
I would say nothing other than the segregation of duties that you just referred to, Chairman.
Okay, great.
Just to expand on that, the main area was in the accounts receivable. So on the revenue side, we have Maria and we have Maria.
Maria and Maria. That's great.
So that is one of the areas that the only hire I think we have scheduled for this year in the finance unit coming in January is another revenue accountant in anticipation of slots revenue coming in from the slots parlor. But that still doesn't segregate all the issues. I mean, they want someone, and it's good practice, but we should have someone separate taking in the cash, filling out the deposit slip, actually making the deposit, and then someone reconciling it. Now you're going to grow my team by 4 or 5 to do that, so we've had to come up with some workarounds. We've actually put some recommendations in there where Enrique would sign off. We put some recommendations in there where there'd be a separate report that I could run that would take those, so I'm not relying on the staff's information. So it was creative. I want to thank the team. They worked with us rather than just saying, no, you have to do it this way. They came up with some creative solutions that would mitigate these risks. So,
Great.
Can I say something to that effect? Because this overall effort actually has been on my mind since I first had to answer the internal control questionnaire for the Office of the Comptroller.
Because then it wasn't just Maria and Maria.
Right. It was actually just Enrique. Right. And in that questionnaire, by the way, every time you answer no, there's about 100 or so questions. There's a big area of opportunity for the finance department, I may say. And we had a bunch of no's back then. And We would still have a few of those, but they have been really addressed over the course of this 2-year short evolution that we've had. Also, some of the policies that were mentioned here, or some of the points that are part of the report, which I think is great, by the way, and I want to thank you. There also had to be a critical mass in the operations to merit some of the dual controls or segregation of duties, for example. We are only beginning to really collect licensing fees in terms of from individuals and vendors. And there's a ramp-up period. We will ramp up significantly where a lot of these risks and controls are that more important. So I think I'm very glad with the balance we've struck in terms of doing an effort like this one at this point that not only checks and looks at what we've done, but also sets us up in a good framework to move forward.
Great. Anybody else? Thank you very much. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me just talk about the schedule here a little bit. We are, as usual, running a little bit behind, and we have a lot of stuff to talk about in the racing division, and we have a lot of stuff to talk about in the problem gambling, and I don't want to rush either of those. But we also have some guests who have an airplane to make. So can we finish up your items? You've got 2 more, and then move the Ombudsman's report to the next topic so that we can do the MGM, and we'll do that before lunch. Does that work?
Did we want to have the thoroughbred discussion prior to the MGM report? I think there might be a little bit of flexibility.
Okay, well, we had it, it would have to be after lunch then. We could do racehorse next, that was the idea. Do racing division next, but then we would probably take a lunch break and have MGM after that. That's okay? Oh, I thought they needed to,
There was an adjustment in flight.
oh, all right, fine. I didn't know that. Okay.
And Mr.
Right.
Chairman, the 2 items left here should be...
Yeah, I know. So we'll finish up administration, and then we'll go to racing division, then we'll take a lunch break, then we'll do Ombudsman Ziemba. Okay? Great.
Okay, I think we're ready. Mike's coming. Mike and Elaine, are you? Our next item is to talk about the links to the job information on our website. Through Elaine and Mike.
Hello, Commissioners.
Hey.
Hello. We'll be very brief. This is quick. But essentially, we've been asked to make sure that the Mass Gaming website is appropriately evolving with the process itself. So in other words, just making sure that all the links and also the homepage is keeping up with where we are in terms of the priorities, in terms of what the current status is. So basically what we're doing right now is we're in the process of slightly reorganizing the homepage to include what our priorities are right now, which would be highlighting the casino jobs that are already coming online, which you'll hear about more from Jill in a little bit, but in terms of what's currently available with Plain Ridge, and then also highlighting in a very prominent place where we will have the ability soon for those that are seeking an employment license to conveniently apply for that online. So the idea being is that when individuals go to the Mass Gaming website, they're not going to have to search for where, in fact, they can look to do that. We just want to make sure that they're getting that those 2 issues are getting prominent real estate on the homepage, so that it's really easy for people that are looking to either, 1, find out what's currently available for casino jobs, and or 2, be able to soon apply for licenses online. So I actually have our web developer just working on some mock-up designs for that, which I'll probably have next week. But that's a really easy fix, actually. And in the meantime, Mike has created a page that will easily, again, take individuals to that information. So he's just going to show you where those links currently are. But like I said, we'll just be very brief.
Sure. Commissioners, good morning.
Good morning.
You have in your packet and up on the screen here a draft page that we hope to launch very soon, which is intended to be one-stop shopping for anyone looking for either employment or a vendor opportunity in the new expanded gaming industry. We start off with 3 bullet points detailing the major bullet points that you need to know if this pertains to you. One comes from our mission statement. The Massachusetts Gaming Commission is committed to providing the greatest possible economic development benefits and revenues to the people of the Commonwealth. To that end, Mass Gaming will provide information relative to employment and vendor opportunities at our licensees. The second bullet point details the emphasis of the Expanded Gaming Act on economic development and job creation. And the third bullet point is a reminder to anyone coming to this page that they need to be either registered or licensed. And we will have a link to the licensing management system once that is up and running through massgaming.com. And what we can get on the page as soon as it launches are the new opportunities at Plainridge Park Casino that have now been posted. Amy, if you could scroll down just a little bit. They have set up a new careers page through their career center. That's for people seeking employment. And we are also linking to their existing vendor opportunities page. And I believe Jill was going to walk us through the new Plainridge Career Center page.
So currently, we do have a link to the Plainridge Park Casino careers page. It exists under the Workforce Supplier and Diversity Development page that we have. But the changes that Elaine and Mike outlined are great because it will make it far easier for folks to access these opportunities. So it's really exciting, I think, because these are the first opportunities for expanded gaming. And Penn National has listed most of the jobs up there. As you know, there will be 500 new permanent employees. And if you click from accounting, finance, IT, to, and then if you click on another link, to food and beverage, that's a really big area, marketing. And what's really exciting is that coinciding, these are the actual job descriptions, but coinciding with this website launch, they also launched a new career center in Plainville on Monday. They've had great outreach to the local community, and this morning I learned from Penn National that they have 755 applications for these jobs submitted already. So this is the first week, so there's a great interest in these jobs.
Great.
Where does our page come from, the homepage, that page you just showed us? What's the homepage link?
That is what our web developer is working on now. It's going to be, I believe, a button at the bottom of the page.
Not necessarily at the bottom, but so essentially right now you can get to it through a jobs page and also the work development page, which I think, we just try to put it anywhere where people's common sense would likely take them to look for it. So those will remain. And then we'll also put them, we have that I want to button on the home page, so we'll be sure that it's there. We'll be sure that you can get to it through FAQs. So everywhere that people would logically think to look for it,
Okay.
you'll be able to get to it.
Okay.
However, like I said, once the web designers are in the process of just creating the graphics and whatnot and just moving some real estate around on the front page so that within the next week and a half or so, when you go to massgaming.com, you will very prominently be able to just click on a button that will take you right to this page.
Great. That's
Okay.
that's
Terrific.
That's what I was getting at. That's great, because this is wonderful. This is exactly, I think, what we had in mind. But getting to it is crucial, so as long as it's prominent on the webpage, on the
It will
homepage,
be.
that's great. Okay, great.
Looks good.
Terrific.
Great.
Thank you. How's the kid?
Good.
So commissioners, yeah, if you could. I am joined by Lance George, VP and General Manager of Plain Ridge Park Casino, John Roan, Vice President of Development at Penn National, and Emil Giordano, Project Executive from Turner Construction. Allison Stanton of Turner Construction is also here. And I'd like to welcome her back from her maternity leave.
Thank you, Jill.
So would we, Jill. Definite improvement to Emil.
So as a requirement of their Category 2 gaming license, Penn National and their general contractor Turner Construction work together to submit diversity plans for the design and construction phase of their casino. And as required, they set up some diversity goals for the construction workforce and for supplier diversity. And you had asked recently for an update regarding the progress. So the next, so this slide that's up here now, actually, I think there should be one that's before this. Can you advance? That's right, workforce. Workforce diversity. If you look at this slide, this references the construction workforce, and it gives you a monthly picture of the diversity and their goals for minority, women, and veterans. On the right-hand side, you notice that their minority workforce goal is 16%, their women's goal is 7%, and the veterans goal, they did not set a numeric goal, but said that they would work hard on the hiring veterans. So you'll see that the numbers month to month, they make significant progress. The cumulative numbers on the right-hand side, the bar on the far right, are the most interesting to look at. 15.81% as of August 31st, so they're so close to meeting their minority workforce goal. 4.16% women, and 5.89% veterans, even with no goal. So that's the workforce. And Penn National actually requested to come here because they have some good news even after this slide, but I'll let them share their good news after we go through some of these. So the next slide, please. So this slide refers to the supplier diversity during design and construction. And the light blue refers to their minority business enterprise. So 20% of the contracts went to MBEs. That's $7.4 million. And 6% of the contracts went to women business enterprises, or $2.1 million. Try as they might, the veterans business enterprise was the real challenge here. So the total construction contracts equaled $37.4 million. Next slide.
That's the total that were awarded through August 31st.
Yes, yes. And we know there's much more to go. I think they're
Right.
halfway through their
Right.
construction
Right.
cycle.
Right.
So the next slide also looks at their design and construction supplier diversity, but just in a different way. The goal for each of the targeted areas is represented by the dark blue. So their MBE goal was 4%, and their actual contracts awarded to MBEs was 20% of the contracts. And the WBE goal was 7%, and they actually awarded 6% of the contracts. And so that lone bar represents their 3% VBE goal. Before I invite you to ask questions, I might ask them to update us on some of their newer figures.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Good morning.
Been working with Jill over the past few days, and it became fairly apparent that we had some very good news that occurred outside of Jill's reporting window. Some good news that occurred in the month of September. And so with me to discuss what has happened in the month of September are the people responsible for this good news. People you guys are familiar with. I've got Jack Round, my coworker, as well as Allison Stanton with Turner. Jack?
Thank you. Thanks, Lance. Good morning.
Morning.
Move the mic over.
Move that mic over, John. There you go.
From the Penn side, clearly, we're pleased with our supplier diversity results through the end of August. As we mentioned in the past, on the construction side, we're doing well. On the design side, not so much. But that's the factors that we inherited when we took over the project. But on the construction side, very happy. We thank Turner for their efforts and their knowledge of the market that have brought these diverse contractors forward to participate in our job. So far, we're happy with them, the quality of the work they're doing, and all is well. Since the end of August, we've actually had the occasion to issue 3 very large contracts to all 3 to Massachusetts-based subcontractors. And that's for HVAC, plumbing, and electrical work, all within the casino and the racing buildings. And in our developments, they're typically 3 of the largest contracts we issue. And in this case, all 3 went to Massachusetts contractors. The mechanical contract actually went to a prime VBE. We actually found one. And so about a $8 million contract was issued to a veterans business enterprise, which now puts us on the board for VBE and gives us about 14% overall of the contracts issued so far. We issued about an $8 million contract to a Massachusetts-based electrical contractor that is WBE. And we had struggled with getting WBE where we ideally wanted it. And this puts a significant improvement on WBEs. So we're now up to 17% against a goal of 7%. And on the MBE side, we had a little additional participation from lower tier subs on the plumbing side, which again just continues to add to our MBE results. But I think most pleasant to us about these particular awards is that the 2 large ones went to the prime contractors, not multiple lower tiers. And these VBEs and WBEs distinguished themselves and flat out outright won the bids.
Great. That's great. That is good.
And there is a second slide which tells you where we're at this point. On $55 million worth of direct construction subcontracts, we're now at 13% MBE versus a goal of 4%. 17% WBE against a goal of 7%, and 14% VBE against a goal of 3%.
And what will the total direct subcontract be? It's
We're at-
$55 million now.
We're at $55 million now. We're about 2/3 of the way done, Mr. Chairman. I would say our direct subcontracts will be somewhere between $80 and $85 million.
Okay. Great.
So we are
This is great.
thrilled with these results.
Yeah.
Great
This is
news, huh?
terrific.
And the
And we're not
quality
done.
of the people we're bringing on board.
Right.
And you're right, Allison. Thank you for that.
While you're here, I just hadn't thought about this before, and probably you all have, Commissioner Stebbins or Mr. George or Director Griffin. Is there any communication with the Suffolk Downs folks and/or the Thoroughbred Horsemen folks, our related employees, about employment opportunities? I mean, obviously, I'm sure they're they're thinking about it probably. Has there been any link between your operation, the job opportunities at your shop, and the people who are looking for work from the East Boston Revere project?
Yeah, there sure has. I know that our corporate director of racing, Chris McElwain, goes way back with Chip Tuttle. My apologies if he's here. I don't know Chip.
I think he is here, yeah.
Okay. And I believe he has informed them of job opportunities around the country for Penn National. Anything locally? I think the short story for us is we're open to any sort of conversation at this point, but I do know that Chris has reached out directly to Chip, and I also believe that Steve O'Toole, who is also here in our racing GM, and Chip have spoken as well. So there's certainly been some communication back and forth.
Great. And I know there have been a lot of other activities that people have undertaken as well, but it's a natural fit, so I'm glad that's connections being made.
Good.
Just a quick question. This is great news with respect to the VBEs and the WBE as well. Do you expect that will have an impact on your construction workforce numbers in terms of those categories as well, women and veterans on the work
While
site?
the ownership of the entities is veteran and women, I think the workforce composition will probably continue in line with what we've experienced so far.
Okay.
So, good.
All right.
But I know, I'm sure I speak, no, I shouldn't. I speak for myself, but I think we need to really celebrate this. This is, we put a lot of energy into jawboning you at the beginning, and you've really come through here. This is the setting the goals and then exceeding them by this much with these major contracts really reflects a go-get-'em attitude, and that's exactly what we were hoping for, and I think you're to be congratulated with this.
We took a cautious approach to some of the bigger contracts and assumed that we would have a pro rata participation, excuse me, between M and WBE. We were not sure that there was a quality player, a VBE player like we have found, but it worked out. I mean, these two organizations came out, learned the job, and just through the bid process distinguished themselves, and they are great choices for us.
And I think one of the things with VBE is it's not always something that a person advertises about their company. So that was part of the challenge as well, was to find a company that was in fact saying, oh yes, I am a veteran business. Because unless they're really federal contractors, it's challenging to find that. So, and then overall also within the percentages, we awarded 14 MBE contracts, 18 WBE contracts, and then as Jack said, 2 VBE. So it's just good to look at those numbers too, to just see that it's spread out.
It's not just dollars, it's multiple contracts.
Right, it's multiple contracts.
Right.
We're pleased.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's great. I echo Commissioner McHugh's appreciation. Thank you.
Well, and this goes back to another issue. I know we talked about it with MGM, who at the time we designated them for a license didn't have I believe, a general contractor name. This, I think, demonstrates the importance of the general contractor also understanding the obligations and the goals of the MBE, WB, and VBE participation. So kudos to Turner, and welcome back, Allison.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me add to that because the 3 contracts referenced here are really mission critical from a construction standpoint: HVAC, plumbing, and electrical. So the fact that they went to minority firms is great. Is really a great news because had they not, that would have made the task that much more challenging because these contracts are going to be, for the balance of the work, and they're large contracts. So, congratulations and thank you.
Commissioners, if I could add, what a pleasure it has been to work with both Penn National and Turner Construction. You can see by the numbers they took this very seriously, but even behind the scenes, they've been working really hard at this. So I'd like to commend and congratulate them as well.
That's great.
Great. Keep it up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. I think we are to item 4. Do we need a quick break before? Yeah. Why don't we take as quick a break as we can, and then we'll get on with the racing division matters at about in 5 or 6 or 8 minutes. maybe 10. Okay, we are reconvening meeting 135, and we will go directly to Director Day of our racing division, Director Dernberger of our racing division. I did have a request from the audience for the speakers to keep the mics close to their mouths. We can be heard pretty well. We're more used to it, but if you all would make a point. Director Dernberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good to be before you again. The first item is going to be a voting item. This involves a schedule change for both of our operators. We had some new legislation that took effect on September 9th of this year. An act relative to racing days. It's chaptered as 311 of the Acts of 2014. What it does is it reduces the number of racing performances and live races required to be conducted in order for the licensee to offer simulcast wagering. That requirement appears in Chapter 128C. The requirement for Plain Ridge Racecourse has been reduced from 100 performances and 900 races to 80 performances and 720 races in 2014. The requirement for the Suffolk Downs operator is reduced from 100 performances and 900 races to 65 performances and 500 races in 2014 and 2015. There's a memo in your packet in which we revisit the issues that led the stakeholders to pursue this legislation. And we've got voting items on page 2 there. One would be we recommend that the Commission approve the request of Plain Ridge Racecourse to conclude its 2014 live race meet on the October 22nd card. And Suffolk Downs, we recommend that the Commission approve the request to conclude its 2014 live race meet with the October 4th card.
Any discussion?
You said, you mentioned the stakeholders. Is everybody in, all the, there are many stakeholders. Are they all in agreement with this?
There are many stakeholders. So in order to conduct live racing, there are purse agreements negotiated between the operator and the representative horsemen's group. So in your packet, you'll also find not just the request of the racetrack, but letters of support from the respective horsemen's organizations.
Oh, yes, I forgot about that. Sorry.
No problem. There's only 173 pages in your packet.
No. But I did read that. I did read that. Okay, thank you.
Remind us, directors, when did this chapter pass?
September 9.
September 9.
Yeah.
So for Suffolk Downs, it would be October 4th. What day of the week is that? Is that a
Saturday, October 4th.
Saturday, October 4th.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Any other discussion? We do need a vote. Commissioner Cameron?
Yes. So this is in keeping with other similar requests in past years. So I move that we approve the Plain Ridge Racecourse request to conclude their 2014 live race meet on October 22nd. And as well as we approve Suffolk Downs' request to conclude their live race meet on October 4th.
Second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Okay. We're going to roll agenda items B and C together. This is going to be a staff effort. We're going to rely a little bit on General Counsel Blue and on Director Griffin to help us out with some of the things we're going to talk about. The first one is I'd like to update you on the business outreach efforts to our stakeholders and to potentially displaced employees. It's our understanding, and actually we received a letter this morning, that Labor and Workforce Development's Rapid Response Team is coordinating with Suffolk Operations to provide support and services to potentially displaced employees. I understand that there was a meeting yesterday afternoon. Ken Messina, who's the director of that group, is working closely with the team, and I believe they have some sessions set up on the 29th where they will meet, with members of the Suffolk Downs workforce. I think Director Griffin maybe is better able to speak to some of the services that this group provides. We did have a meeting last year when we were looking at the potential of this happening in Plainville as well. So we've had some face-to-face meetings in the agency between Director Griffin and myself as well. So we'll let her talk a little bit more about that.
The Rapid Response Team is the Massachusetts Department of Career Services statewide early intervention team that responds to plant closings and makes sure that the workers know what their resources are and potential retraining for other opportunities. So the rapid response team gathers information about the employees' needs, organizes services to help them get back to work. They explain the unemployment insurance benefits. They give information and referrals to area career centers. They give job search assistance, resume preparation assistance, interview skills workshops, and information about educational and training opportunities. They also give up-to-date information about the current labor market.
Okay.
In addition, the Suffolk team is compiling for us a list of employees so that the commission can maintain that for employee hiring preferences with the new Region A gaming licensee. And that's employees of Suffolk Downs. We've also got, of course, our occupational licensees that we have concerns about. So,
Excuse me, Director.
Yes.
I just wanted to point out, I think I mentioned this yesterday, that for the most part, the big jobs at the Wynn Everett are going to be down the road a piece. But there are jobs starting now, and they are looking for space. They will be hiring for their preparatory work. So I'm not sure whether they, in their minds, have made the link to their sort of thinking when we do that with those big numbers, those 3,000 and 4,000 jobs. But we want to make sure that they're attentive to, even if they've got 5 or 10, that's a start. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you for reminding us of that. We've also got our occupational licensees. That's the group that represents owners and trainers primarily, is the Horsemen's Benevolent and Protective Association. That's a New England chapter of a national organization. I do believe the Rapid Response Team has spoken with them, but we've also, with Commissioner Stebbins' help, had the Massachusetts Small Business Development Center get in contact with them. We have about 1,100 occupational licensees that could be immediately affected by the shutdown. So we've got them in touch with each other. I know there's a lot of conversation. We've also been aware of some conversation with the national chapter as well. And we've got a number of requests from that organization to look at what we can do from the commission standpoint. They're standing to lose quite a bit of their funding mechanisms for their insurance and other benefits that they provide to their members. The Massachusetts Thoroughbred Breeders Association is similarly situated, although the majority of its statutory funding is used for purses for state-bred racehorses, but they're in a similar situation here, losing a source of funding. So we're going to ask General Counsel Blue to speak a little bit about the provisions in the Racehorse Development Fund. I'm going to remind everybody that this is established by Section 60 of Chapter 23K, and it is a distribution of monies from the Gaming Licensing Fund and from gross gaming revenue. That money gets distributed 80% to our live racing licensees' purse accounts, 16% to the representative breeders' organizations, and 4% to the representative horsemen's organizations for benevolency purposes. So some of those monies, we understand, may be available from the licensing fund in perhaps December. And so we've got a couple of questions. I know that the commission, on advice with the Horse Racing Committee, has determined that we're going to be writing some regulations that will enable monies, if there is no live racing licensee, to be escrowed. But the question presented before us is whether that 4% for benevolency funds and possibly the 16% to breeders, if those payments could continue to be made in the absence of a live racing licensee.
So we know that we were requested by the Racing Advisory Committee to look at escrowing the funds, and we are in fact working on regulations as they requested to escrow the funds for between 2 and 3 years to have them available in the event that one of the breeds racing facility went dark for a period of time. We are also looking at the statute that governs the Racehorse Development Fund. That, as we know, that's a new provision with the Gaming Act. We do not have regulations under that provision yet, but we are now looking at regulations that would potentially allow us, if we can by statute, to make the 4% payments while a facility is dark, and perhaps the 16% that's under that statute as well.
Explain exactly, so for everybody in the room knows, what would that mean exactly? 4 and 16 would go to where?
Well, of the Racehorse Development Fund, as the committee required, 75% went to thoroughbred racing, 25% went to the harness. So it would be 80% of that 75% would be to purses, then 16% of that 75% would be to breeders, 4% of that 70%.
Go to breeders for
breeding programs.
for their use, discretionary use as they see fit.
And-
Okay.
The majority of it goes to purses for state-bred
Yes.
racehorses. They have some other administrative costs.
Okay.
And then the 4% is their health and welfare funds that they have. So what we're looking at is whether we can craft regulations that will allow some of those payments to continue, even if a facility is dark. And we're trying to determine under the statute how much of that has to be tied to the existence of a licensed facility, or can we do some other things with that? So it is our expectation that probably by the next commission meeting, we will have a first draft of something for the commission to look at.
So with the 4%, I know that those benefits run out by the end of the year. Would it be possible, if you deem legally we can do this, to use the emergency regulation mechanism in order to move that along so that maybe there wouldn't be a break for those benefits?
Yes, we could use that like we do and have done for other regulations for the commission. Yes, we could do that if the commission would like.
I think that would be important to provide those monies as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, great.
But, have we given any thought to going to the legislature to make some short-term adjustment to the 80%? 80% goes into purse accounts now, but if there's no thoroughbred racing, and our idea is to try and escrow it for 3 years, but has there any thought been given to go into the legislature and seeing if we couldn't get some of the 80% to add on to the 16%, to create a fund that would be available now in the sort of interregnum period? Come October 1st, we're going to have a better idea of what's available for next year, right? So conceivably, this would be moot. That would be the best outcome.
That would be the best outcome, yes.
But realistically, or at least contingently planning, have we given any thought to that?
Commissioner, we have. That's a great question. So there's lots of thinking going on right now, both in-house with staff and, of course, with our stakeholders and with the private parties that are involved. The timeline on this is the the New England HBPA is going through their elections this week as we speak. I think that they count ballots Friday, if I'm not mistaken. So we, the staff in the agency, have been trying to give them the space, and then next week we're going to begin some substantive conversations. We've received some communications from their attorney. We've received some communications from their executive director about ideas they have, particularly about capturing some additional monies as well, and where those could be repurposed. So those conversations are in the planning stages, and then I think we're going to be rolling up our sleeves over the next couple of weeks and coming back to you to have a conversation in this forum.
Okay. We're going to start, okay. It seems to me that if that's a viable and not DOA kind of idea, it seems to me that the sooner we coalesce around some plan to execute it, the better, because these things take a little lead time up on the hill. But it seems to me that's a source of money that otherwise isn't going to go anyplace for a couple of years, perhaps, and could be directed to sustaining breeders right away.
But there are others that are available. That one would probably be a pretty controversial one, and would also have to go back to the Racehorse Advisory Committee or whatever it's called, because they're the ones who figure out the split.
No,
first.
I'm not talking about readjusting the split. I'm talking about the split's been made.
I'm sorry. Okay, but gotcha. But
right.
yeah,
Okay.
I understand. Excuse me. That's a good idea. That's one of several buckets of money that we have identified that might be available for any of a number of purposes, whether it's somehow or other trying to support an operator, whether it's trying to support the breeders, whether it's trying to add further to purses, whatever. There are a number of buckets that we've already identified that would probably take legislative action, probably are not something that we could change on ourselves. The issue here, and I think this is, I don't know whether you're getting to this or not, but as quickly as possible, we need to get all the stakeholders in the room. And one of the critical stakeholders is in a gestation process for its leadership team right this minute. But as soon as we can get all of the stakeholders in the room, where issues like that and these other buckets and other ideas can be, worked out, we're anxious to do that. And that's one of our highest priorities, is to try to figure out a medium for essentially a strategic planning meeting for the thoroughbred racing industry, with all of the stakeholders at hand and all of these buckets and ideas that everybody's kicking around. And this is one of them.
Right. No, I agree. It's really important to get everybody to agree, get everybody on the same page as quickly as possible, and then come up with a plan, then execute it, and put our shoulder behind the wheel.
Right.
Okay.
Well, there's another alternative there, which I don't know if you might get to this, but we have a statutory deadline on the racing application coming that you alluded to, Commissioner.
Right away.
October 1.
Yep.
So it's really a week from today.
Well, we've talked about that one also. Are you planning on discussing that?
I am.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so we'll segue into that. And actually, before I get into this, we're going to remind everybody of what that process is, how you become a live racing licensee, and then we're going to talk about exactly what Commissioner Zuniga was getting at, and we'll have some more conversation about possibilities there. I just want to remind everybody, as you've come to realize, that racing is a nimble, flexible, and adaptive industry. And the other thing that you're coming to learn about race trackers, if you haven't learned it already, is we don't have a lot of quit in us. We keep going. So from day one, I think our message to you and your message to the legislature has been consistently that the existing pari-mutuel and simulcasting statutes could benefit from some revision or updating to align the governing law and realities of the current racing business model. So we anticipated being able to participate in a near-term dialogue about how to improve that model, but instead we find ourselves today asking the question, what are the immediate barriers to entry that would discourage someone from filing a live racing application for racing dates in 2015? The process itself, as Commissioner Zuniga was starting to point out, could be a real obstacle this year. So the statutory requirements is that there is a timeline for filing that application. MGL's Chapter 128A, Section 2 imposes a statutory deadline of October 1 on all applications to hold or conduct live racing meetings in the Commonwealth. That's next Wednesday. Following receipt of applications, we schedule public hearings. Those would be in late October in the proposed host communities, and we solicit public comments. The Racing Division then reports the summary of the hearings and the public comments to the Commission. This year, that's anticipated to be on November 6th. And then the Commission is required by statute to grant or dismiss such applications not later than November 15th. So the first barrier that we note is the almost immediate application deadline. Under the circumstances, interested and affected parties in the thoroughbred industry, which our statute refers to as the running horse industry, have not yet had the opportunity to crystallize a business plan of the complexity required to operate live racing, at least not to the degree required to file an application. Our live racing application is pretty lengthy and involved. And I will tell you that the two messages we've been hearing from our stakeholders consistently and unanimously throughout the last 7 days is that we need more time. The other is that for a number of reasons, the interests of the thoroughbred racing and particularly the breeding industry and all of its attendant agribusiness extensions would be best served by conducting that live race meet at the Suffolk Downs facility, if at all possible. There are a number of productive discussions occurring, and the parties whose livelihoods are at risk are looking to you for guidance. So Section 2 of Chapter 128A does provide a mechanism whereby an applicant who has timely filed an application could then file a later supplemental application regarding the same premises for your consideration. The Commission would then have 30 days to grant or dismiss that supplemental application. And in this situation, I guess I respectfully suggest that neither the public interest nor the stakeholder interests are necessarily best served by this mechanism under the circumstances. We can talk about that a little bit, but maybe the easier thing to do is to just point out that this is a statutory deadline that we've got in front of us. So the agency may have significant administrative flexibility, and we've certainly noticed that you demonstrated that throughout the gaming licensing application process. The clearest route to an extension of this date and the receipt of meaningful applications seems to me to be emergency legislation, amending that statutory deadline. But absent that possibility, I've requested council to assist our stakeholders by providing clear guidance as to what form these placeholder applications should take in order to be able to preserve that we can consider them. Council?
Well, we had placeholder applications last year from 2 applicants.
Yeah.
Did those applications comply in all respects, but for the one-day only racing date, comply in all respects with the other requirements of the statute?
They did not. One of the applications was missing a significant amount of information that we would have needed to make a determination. And so we welcomed that if and when they submitted a supplemental application.
And so how did we handle that last year?
What would be the legal term?
We granted at least one-day license.
We did, and there were contingencies in the license.
Yes.
I believe we granted it with the proviso that they would come back with the additional information should those contingencies become effective and the license therefore become effective.
Well, why, would that solve the problem now? A similar kind of thing. Give us an application, give us your general plan, give us a plan that looks realistic, and we'll work on that subject to a concrete plan ASAP.
I think even more than that. I think what we've talked. I'm going to use colloquial language because I don't know the formal language here. But what some of us have considered in discussion with the staff on the emergency legislation, there were 2 problems. One, to try to get emergency legislation in 5 days was a long shot at best. Number 1, and number 2, we did not have an emphatic argument for extending the deadline to what. We didn't know what we would extend it to. So I think that route is not a very viable route. But what we have talked about is we do have a fair amount of flexibility in our administration of this October 1 deadline. And what we would like to have the commission consider is being as flexible as we can possibly be and saying to the industry and saying to the folks who are trying to get their act together but can't possibly do it in the next 5 days, that get something in there, get a placeholder in there. We will be as flexible as we can be within, appropriate standards on not asking you to give us more than you can possibly give us. We will be flexible when you can come back at a later date and amend that placeholder. And where, again, keeping an eye out on what's fair and appropriate, if new things materialize 2 or 3 months down the road, we will be as flexible as we can in permitting new ideas that might contribute to the discussion about salvaging thoroughbred horse racing. We will be as flexible on those as we can as well. So it's sort of taking your point to its ultimate extension.
I think that would be a terrific idea. Give us a concept plan and get it in by the 1st, and then we'll figure out what to do with it. And that ties in, if we take that approach, that ties in with the stakeholders, the association getting its elections finished, with the possibility of getting everybody in a room, knowing who the leaders are. I think we ought to do it.
Can I just, you mentioned in your remarks that the feedback was essentially we need more time. Is that for even the concept plan?
It really is. It really is. That we've heard that unanimously and reiterated again this morning with some level of desperation.
Well, but a concept plan can be we would like to have, I'm not trying to draft the plan now. But we would like to, we are very interested, under the right conditions, in running a racing meet. We would like to do it in such and such a place, but if we can't do it in such a place, we'd like to explore the possibility of doing it elsewhere. I mean,
For some number of
for
days.
some number of days.
Right.
And we would very much like you to take this as an application, and we'll get back to you later as details materialize.
I think what Commissioner McHugh is suggesting, concept is not a limiter.
Right.
Concept is an opener. you
Right.
know. So don't let the word concept in his construct be considered a constraint. We're trying to create a situation that will be as flexible as reasonably possible to accommodate this peculiar situation we're in. So give us something, give us a placeholder, and we will work with you to try to let legitimate opportunities flower as it becomes plausible.
I think that the clearest guidance that we can provide as to what the sufficiency of that placeholder is important. I certainly think I'm going to get that question this afternoon, so to the extent that we could have that conversation, and maybe it's something that Council and I talk about later, but I think that's, what will satisfy the requirements and the needs to reserve that place.
Well, suppose we said the presumption is that a sincere description of interest will be the default for a sufficient placeholder.
I think the key is that we have an application. It is somewhat detailed. I think to the extent that someone fills that out to the best of their ability and explains to us where the gaps are and why, then that should be reasonably sufficient for the commission to start looking at it. I personally have thought about the situation where someone may want to apply, but they don't know where their facility is, for example. I think if they explain to us what that might be, or potentially where they might partner for a facility, that's something the commission can start to look at. And I do believe the commission could issue a license with conditions as they do on the gaming side, or they could ask for supplemental filing. So, my sense would be that you take the current application and fill it as much as you can, explain where the gaps are, and, the commission can start reviewing it to see what's there and what's, what might be needed.
I guess I'm trying to envision the situation where there's somebody out there, and I may be just dreaming, who's got a real interest, who's got some money, so this is not a pie in the sky, but doesn't know anything about a place, doesn't know, and really wants to jump in and look around and find a place or do a deal with an existing place as quickly as possible, but at this moment doesn't have a clue as to where that place or who that might be or who that person might be. And I would like to construct a situation where under these circumstances, he, she, or it could file a document that we would treat as a sufficient placeholder.
So that's
I mean, I don't know if we're saying different things.
No, I
but-
think we're saying the same thing. That's the situation I was thinking of. I would suggest that they use the application form, but they explain precisely that. And the commission could look at it and say that, within so many days of some date, there needs to be a supplemental filing that they can explain, or, because I think that is the situation. There's also potential situations where people may decide they want to partner, and it may be a partner who can understand the racing side, but someone else who has a potential space for a facility. There may be a license that could be granted conditionally with some transfer in the future. Those are some of the things that we are looking at, my group is looking at for regulations as well. Also looking at potential regulations for accepting applications outside of that period, if it's a totally new person in the Commonwealth that wanted to come forward that had never been part of the racing industry before. But I do think the commission has the flexibility to take an application like the one we've been describing, look at it, review it, hold the necessary public hearings, and then perhaps condition it.
The statute, I mean, this is after all a public solicitation. And the statute contemplated, a steady state, and this is unusual. This is certainly an unusual situation from a statutory perspective. What, if anything, under the statute could be contemplated relative to getting no applications, getting for racing, getting a rebid, if you will, scenario?
Well, that's what we're looking at for regulations, because the statute is very much set up as though there is a steady state and has been one for a long time.
Yes.
And I think it's in the best interest of the Commonwealth if someone comes forward outside of the application period for the Commonwealth to be able to consider another application, because that obviously brings jobs and revenue to the Commonwealth. So we are looking at drafting regulations that would allow, under certain circumstances, the Commission to accept an application outside of the period. The question is how you would define that so that you're not, in violation of the statute. But maybe in a situation where there is either a new entity or there is a new facility or someone who, arrives on the scene after the fact would like to submit an application, if we can create a way by regulation for the Commission to take that through the normal process, I think that would be beneficial. So that's something we're looking at in terms of regulations, if we can do that.
Well, I was also thinking of the notion of, documents aside, I was thinking if we were to get a statement of interest or something to that effect, a statement of intention in whatever format that may come prior to October 1st, it is conceivable that that could be viewed later on via regulation or otherwise, or by this body, as complying with the statutory deadline, details to follow. Whether that's a new entity or an existing group or what have you.
I think as long as something gets on file by October 1st, I think the Commission has flexibility to address it. I think the best and cleanest route is to try to use the application we have, because that's, it at least lets you know what the Commission is going to be looking at in the long run on how we evaluate it. But I think the best you can do is good to get the process started.
So it would come down to, and getting back to Director Durenberger's concern about people being deterred by the formality of the application, it gets down to a clear message that if you take the application, put down on the application as much as you can, and leave out what you don't know, and get it in by October 1st, the Commission will consider it.
And we've even talked, when Commissioner Cameron and I talked with staff about this, we raised the issue, what are the impediments to letting people get in, get something in, get a placeholder in? And we talked about the bond. There is a bond issue, and we've suggested the idea of even having Catherine look at a workaround like we've done on the 85 million. Maybe you don't have to, if the bond is material money, and I don't really know what the actual money turns into, but if the bond is an impediment, then maybe it can be constructed that the bond isn't called upon until some other date. So we're trying to work, you have the spirit exactly right. We are trying to work our way around every impediment that might get in the way of a reasonable, good faith effort to keep the door open to a possibility.
Yeah. And I guess the only glass I'm trying to put on, and maybe I don't need to, is that the ultimate result needs to be in a clear set of declarative sentences put out to everybody, so that we don't have anybody thinking I can't get in because I don't have X, Y, or Z, and do that quickly so that they can make the October 1st deadline.
All right. Well, do you feel like you have the tools you need to convey, you, Jennifer, to the people? You said you're going to get questions this afternoon.
I will. I'll probably get with Council Blue and put some language together, and we'll maybe put something on the web.
But is there clarity on the spirit of what we're trying to do?
Absolutely. I don't think there's been any question about that
Yeah.
throughout the process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's implementing the spirit in whatever the appropriate language is, but I think Commissioner McHugh immediately picked up on exactly the thrust, the direction we were trying to go.
I have a quick question. Being as flexible as we can with whatever comes through the door on October 1st, is there anything that really, are these kind of follow-up benchmarks hold us, the Commission, to its level of participation, until I think the end of November, or the middle of November, by which we have to act? Can we structure the the post-October 1st deadline to a process that speeds along discussion with applicants, maybe puts potential applicants in a room to, I think the point or the scenario you raised, to maybe, two entities out there that didn't know the other one was applying decide they can sit in the room and maybe figure something out. I mean, is there a way for us post-October 1st to finesse a process with the commission involved so that we're not waiting around till, the November deadline to be helpful or encourage participation, or, I hate to say, have a meet and greet among the applicants, and we hope, with our declaration right now that we're encouraging people to put in something, that we can kind of finesse around our regular process, if that makes sense.
Well, one of the things that we did last year, which may be more helpful this year, is once we reviewed the applications, we put them on our web so that people could see them and look at them.
Okay.
So if we do that promptly, then people will see who applied. If there's partnership opportunities there, they'll see through the applicants. But they may also, other people who didn't apply may see people who are looking for partners or what they have planned. So we could work to get those posted more quickly than perhaps we did last season. We can time, the only end time is that the commission has to make a decision by November 15th. So within that October 1st to November 15th timeframe, we can, time our public hearings, or if we should do them sooner perhaps rather than later, we can do that if that helps create discussion. We have some flexibility in the process during that period.
Okay.
And the grant or dismiss is on that original application. The commission can consider the supplemental application at any time up until December 31st of next year. It doesn't give you a lot of time to run a race meet next year, but at any time. And then you have another 30 days to consider the supplemental application and take action on it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just looking for any opportunities for us to, this is a different year, obviously, and trying to find a way to finesse a solution after we get some level of interest by October 1st, I think is in our best interest.
Well, we certainly have broad discretion in interpreting statutes within our domain,
We do.
and we've got great interpreters.
Anything else?
So impediment number 2, actually, you brought up, which is the bond issue. So we are looking at that. The chapter requires a bond in the amount of $125,000 in the case of a regular live racing applicant, a $25,000 bond in the case of a fair racing applicant. So we touched on that briefly, and we're looking at what administrative flexibility we have there. The third obstacle,
Just a minute.
Yep.
Does that have to accompany the application?
Well, that's the question.
It doesn't appear to by statute. It says upon the award. So another regulation that we're looking at is defining what that means. And so perhaps we can stretch it out so that it's maybe sometime before the meet starts, as opposed to, that's what we're looking at to see how we can address that.
Okay. But they don't have to put that down next Wednesday.
Routinely, they have in the
Yeah, they have
past.
in the
That's been the
past.
custom, but the language permits us, it looks like,
Okay.
to do
All
a
right.
work.
Okay, so,
And from my perspective, I think this is something that we really have a lot of flexibility as far as I'm concerned. From a risk perspective, the situation that the bond is trying to prevent is one that would put some of the stakeholders in jeopardy, and this situation being as unusual as it is something that I think does not need to be addressed with the bond up front.
Okay.
And then the third impediment, and it's significant, of course, is just the cost of operating live racing. But a lot of those costs can be contracted around between the parties in terms of their various profit-sharing agreements, especially if you have a situation where you're simulcasting for 365 days. I think those conversations are happening as we speak, and so that's out there. And then beyond that, again, the legislative changes. It's a challenging environment here for operators. We've got the current takeout structure, the inability to offer rebates to customers, restriction on the number of simulcast signals offered, and of course the state withholding tax issue that we've all talked so much about. These are serious issues that we've recommended and you've all agreed need to be addressed going forward. And you've signaled that to the legislature, and we continue to stand ready to help advocate for those.
Anybody?
Yeah, but, yeah. Those were in active pursuit of corrections for. So the other ones, it seems to me, are within our control. We don't have any control over them, and so we've got to try and get people in with the understanding that we're actively working on them, and we'll continue to do so.
Yep.
That's about the best we can do on those, right?
Yes.
I just wanted to remind, in case there were
Right.
any operators who hadn't been following
Right.
the story thus far, that,
Right.
that those are things that the commission is actively has been looking at and made
Right.
recommendations about.
Right.
But they're a good reminder of if there is, I don't know what the likelihood or appetite over in the legislature to address some of these will be in terms of timing as well. That's their prerogative. But the context in which all of this operates, I think, is important. And we've said it before, and now it becomes even more critical to remind those who would listen.
It's a fight to take up next year.
Does the idea of maybe shortly after, as soon after the elections are completed as possible, of trying to figure out a process by which everybody can get in the room, does that make sense to you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, we're talking with stakeholders daily.
Well, I know you are,
yeah,
but I
and-
mean, getting all of us together in some kind of an organized, because the kinds of things that Commissioner McHugh talked about, which there are near-term legislative intervention that could be helpful above and beyond the big reform stuff we've been talking about. So if you think that's a good idea, then I think you remain our point to try to pull that together with everybody, is try to figure out a format and a structure. What's a productive way to get the appropriate people in the room to figure out a strategy here? And I leave it to you to try to help us figure out how to
And we're
do that.
penciling in the week of October 6th, so
Okay,
we're
great.
looking at 2 weeks. So.
Super, okay, great.
Yeah, so the elections you were talking about are the horsemen's elections.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, thank you. Yes,
Yes.
the horsemen's elections. Right. Okay, anything else, folks?
That's the update that I have for you, unless council has anything else that she's looking
I
at.
thought we wanted to discuss today some of the requests we had from our employees to attend, to go
Oh,
to the
yes.
track. We have received a number of requests from our employees to go to the track, and pursuant to our enhanced ethics code, the track is treated the same as a casino. They're not allowed to go unless they're there on business, or they can go as part of a social family event. If they check in with the state police, they advise the executive director, and they understand that they cannot wager. And so we were going to ask the commission to consider whether they would be comfortable with treating this situation as per that section of the enhanced ethics code, and that if an employee did want to go on their own time, they could go, but they would have to follow those rules. Where they didn't wager, they notified Executive Director Day, and they checked in with the state police when they were at the track. And this is limited to Suffolk, because we know this is an unusual situation.
To Suffolk for the remainder of this meeting.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I think the requests are along the lines from other employees who have never seen
Right.
Suffolk and
Yeah.
would like to take the opportunity to see it.
Mhm.
I have no problem with handling it in that matter.
I think that's fine.
I totally agree. Do we need any more formal action on that?
No, I don't think so. We'll work with Executive Director Day, and we'll let the employees that have inquired know, and set up the process for doing that.
Right.
Okay.
No, it's a good idea.
Yeah. Anything else on this item?
Thank you,
All right,
Mr. Chair.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, if I understood you correct, we're okay to take a lunch break, and then we'll then come back with you and with MGM. Is that correct, Ombudsman Siamba? All right. Everybody ready for a break?
Yep.
You think we can do it for half an hour?
Yep.
Is that all right?
Too close. We don't
The
have to go
food's
all the way
right.
down. I know.
Well, it's just right down the
The
hall.
lines are through the roof down here. I think we need 45 minutes.
All right, 45 minutes. We will reconvene at 1:45. We are ready to convene at about 1:45, the 135th meeting. Ombudsman Ziemba is next on the agenda.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners. We are joined by MGM Springfield to give us their monthly report. I will ask Mike Mathis, President of MGM Springfield, to introduce his team and give us his monthly report. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, Commissioners. It's nice to be back in front of you.
Welcome.
Very pleased to provide our monthly update for some of our project development activities. And putting it together, realized how busy the last 30 days have been. And but very, very happy about all of the outreach and the progress on various entitlements. And really, in our view, the real work that needs to take place so that we're ready to go come November 4th, which I know was an important message that you gave us when you provided us your provisional licensing, and we took it to heart, and we very much want to be ready to go. So with that, I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves, and then we'll kick off with the initial presentation.
I'm Chuck Irving. I'm with Davenport Properties in Boston.
Chris Signoli, DPW Director for the City of Springfield.
Welcome.
So what you have up on the screen is our, I think we view it as our 4-month look ahead. We wanted to show you the type of activities that we were going to be engaged in over the 4 months between the initial provisional licensing and the November vote. And happy to report that there continues to be much progress among many of these line items. Chuck and Chris can help tag team some of our descriptions, and I won't walk through. I think, as has been the case in a prior presentation, we won't walk through each of the line items in detail. If you see anything of interest that we can update you on, we're happy to do that. But there's a couple of items that are certainly, we believe, critical path and are things that we've been more proactive about. One of those, for example, is coordination with the viaduct project. That is an important regional project in terms of repairing the infrastructure to that span of the 91, which largely fronts our project. And we think there's an opportunity because both projects have a very similar construction timeline. So to the extent that there's going to be disruption in the area, and there certainly will be, I think we can take advantage of overlapping activities to make sure that we don't, for example, close an exit ramp unnecessarily long while we're doing offsite improvements. We're going to coordinate and make sure that those activities happen at the same time. Chuck, is that something you want to talk to a little bit about?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the team that the state has put on the viaduct project is fantastic, and we have full confidence that they're going to be on schedule. The bid package went out this past week, and I think Michael O'Dowd is going to deliver this on time. One of the big factors that concerns the state on this is the impact on parking in the nearby area, especially relative to the courthouse. So Chris Signoli and I met with state courthouse officials last month, and maybe you can describe where we ended up with that.
Sure. A couple things. Number one, with regard to the viaduct, as Chuck was mentioning, the project is out to bid. It was out to bid September 20th. The City of Springfield has received a copy of the PS&E, the final plans that the contractors are looking at. We've had final coordination meetings within the last month with Mass DOT and all the utility companies out there. So everybody is on board with the process as the way that it's moving forward here. Everybody who has a voice at the table, or should have a voice at the table, has had one throughout this entire process. On the 15th of this month, a week and a half ago, we met with the court people and discussed issues related to parking and access to their facility, both for the viaduct project and with regard to the casino project as well. We'll talk about the meeting in a second, but following the meeting, one of the things that we did is we met with the Springfield Parking Authority, and the Springfield Parking Authority has extremely good records as to the monthly parkers that park in their facilities, how many of them work for the court systems. So what we're going to be able to do is basically identify the exact volume of people that are going to be displaced by the casino project. One of the other things that they were voicing their concerns about was if there were trolley systems, example, that were going to be ferrying people throughout the city of Springfield, concerns about defendants and complainants being on the same bus, issues like that. And basically, right now, people find a parking space, whether they're on one side of a case or the other, they go to the facility. And we think with the identification of the parking in the city, both public and private, we're going to be able to continue the process. We're going to be reporting back to them probably within the next month, once we get all the information from the parking authority on there. So we are as I mentioned at the last meeting, we've identified over 1,000 parking spaces within a quarter of a mile of the project that will be able to service both the displaced parkers overall at the casino site, but as well as the displaced people from the courthouse themselves. One other thing that I just wanted to mention as a monthly side from the city standpoint is we are holding monthly meetings with the utility companies to discuss other projects in the city, but primarily the viaduct project and the casino project, so that we are all on the same page with regard to schedule, how we're going to be handling reviews, et cetera, so that it's not all of a sudden surprises that are coming in on any side of the table, either from the design team or from the city. We are all basically getting into the same boat, identifying what our concerns will be. We always try to avoid telling somebody to move the building 3 feet to the right and the other one's telling it to move it 3 feet to the left, so that we all know exactly what we're dealing with. So from the city standpoint, within the past month and a half, 2 months, we've seen some very big steps. The viaduct getting out to bid, extremely important to us as the city and to this project as well.
Let me just add one thing there. So MGM came into the courthouse discussion, as you know, offering to pay for shuttle service as well as parking off-site. As Chris indicated, courthouse officials feel that would be a very dangerous idea, putting litigants in a small van after a decision has been rendered. So what they've asked us to do is find a surface lot, which is open and visible from everywhere, that would be designated to the courthouse during this period where we absorb all the parking. And we can do that, and I think our next meeting, we're going to come back to you and say, here's where the lot is, and we can guarantee that the economics are not going to be different than what current courthouse constituents and officials are paying right now.
And I'll just add on to that. To the extent there is a delta there, we will subsidize that parking so that there is no impact to the individuals that otherwise were taking advantage of the surface spaces.
Great.
So unless you have any questions, because the viaduct's been such an important issue, we just want you to know we've been proactive about it. And I know you in particular, Commissioner McHugh, were concerned about
Right, no, that sounds like a good plan. It sounds
about
like
the parties. In terms of what you're going to see for the remainder of our presentation, and I know this is far too much detail to really pick out. So we're gonna roll from this to a update about some of our community outreach, vendor activities, workforce development activities, and then we're going to bring it back to a full development timeline, which I think was one of the asks from the last presentation, was to make sure that you got some comfort that we were tracking multiple activities towards a finish line. So with that, Amy, can you bring up the presentation? Great. Can I just click the wall? Vendor outreach, workforce development, and community engagement. We continue to be engaged with the community. I think it's very important, given the pending vote and our commitment under the host community agreement, to make sure that they understand that we're as committed today as we were back in July of 2013 when we received their approval. So here's a demonstration of a lot of activities along those three categories. A lot of them were planned before the SJC decision, and we believe that they're part of pre-development activities in order to make sure that we've got the infrastructure to execute come November 4th. And this is just an example of what we've done in the last 30 days. Stone Soul Music Festival. This is a civic organization that we continue to support. The picture to the right are African-American gentlemen, residents, who do a reenactment of the African-American soldiers from the Civil War. It's a group that we've been supporting from the very beginning and that we will continue to support. And it celebrates music as well. Central Mass Business Expo. We've been very attentive to the Worcester area because, as you know, being in central Massachusetts, they're on the periphery I think in a good way, of two very, very large developments between ours and now the Wynn Resorts. So we want to make sure that they understand that we want to tap into their businesses. We're working with the local chamber, Tim Murray, former lieutenant governor, we've got a great relationship with, and we send our groups out to make sure that we can fill our database with suppliers and vendors in the Worcester area. East of the River, this is their chamber event. You'll recognize Kelly Tuckey as well. We're reaching out to the chambers. We've got a quarterly commitment to move around the region, but we're really exceeding that. If there's a request or if there's an opportunity for us to tap into a local a chamber event, we do so all the time. Again, we're building our database. So when we go to let out our goods and services. United Way breakfast. They were kind enough to invite me to present at the United Way. United Way does great work in Springfield. You can see that it was a packed room, and I think what we wanted to reinforce is our commitment in all of our properties, whether it's Las Vegas or a regional property, on giving back to the community. Over half of our employees across the company contribute to our voluntary employee charitable foundation, and we would expect that to be the case in Springfield, if not exceed those levels. So it was a great opportunity for us to start to talk about our philanthropy. This is a woman business leader event. The woman to the left in the yellow jacket is Kenyatta Lewis. She's based in Las Vegas, but she's been out here quite a bit. She runs our National Diversity Supplier Program. So dedicated position to make sure not only that we procure locally, but that we procure through diverse organizations, women-owned, minority-owned. I was here earlier when the Penn National folks presented their statistics. They certainly set a very high bar, and we need women like Kenyatta, Jerry Harris to the right, African-American woman who is in charge of the construction-specific pieces of this. But applaud the Penn National folks on what they're able to do, and we want to meet that bar. This is a civic association. Commissioner Stebbins will recognize that association. Again, just continuing our support, our local support. These are annual events that we've supported from the very beginning, and it will continue to. Puerto Rican Parade, you can see we've got activated residents who are focused on the vote. I know that's not your bailiwick, but certainly we're focused on having our supporters understand the question and what's at stake, and we're happy to see a continuing great support there in Springfield. This one I'm really excited about, and I'm going to play a video in a short moment, but I want to spend a few moments about this event. The gentleman to the left in the chef's jacket is Anthony Amoroso. We call him Chef Anthony. He is the executive chef for Aria. We brought him out last week along with his colleague, Chef Edmund from the Bellagio, to host a really wonderful event in Court Square. You all know Court Square from our tour, and you're going to see it highlighted in just a few moments. But what we did is we had our chefs stop by the Putnam Vocational Academy in Springfield to teach juniors, I think this is part of their juniors in that program, about culinary skills. And our chefs are rock stars in the industry, and we're able to sit down and tell them the practical day-to-day work that goes around being an executive chef. Really fantastic. They were so happy with the event that the instructor asked us if they could partake and help staff the event that the chefs came out for the following day. So we had 12 of the kids at Court Square, and our chefs signed the jackets. They're going to put it up in the vocational school. And one of the great things about Chef Anthony's story is he started in a vocational academy. So we gave them some real context for that they can achieve their dreams from relatively humble beginnings. You'll recognize this scene. Since we came to Springfield, and it starts with Jim Murrin, we've fallen in love with Court Square. Court Square, I think topographically, is the oldest existing site in Springfield since its founding in 1636. You'll recognize those buildings from our tour. You've got the old First Church, which is the white church in the background. The yellow beige building straight ahead is Old Court Square Hotel, which was one of the leading hotels in the turn of the century. We're potentially going to invest with Peter Picknelly, one of the Picknellys, on getting that hotel back open as a boutique hotel and as part of our program. We're not there yet, but we're trying to figure out how to preserve that building. Across the street, the perspective where the photo was taken from is State Street, which is where the courthouse is. This is the perspective from City Hall. Beautiful buildings in the area, and we wanted to highlight Court Square. So I'm going to play for you in a moment a video from last Friday where we held an event. What you see are a bank of banquet tables that are right in front of Old First Church. A little bit difficult to see. The event we put on was to bring 200 people down to Court Square, have them fed by our executive chefs with the assistance of the Putnam High School kids. And we funded 2 charitable programs. One is our MGM Springfield Public Art Program. You might recall that was an aspect of our application where we're going to work with Professor Simpson, which is a UMass student, UMass professor, and some local kids to do murals, to do public art, to bring art to the public schools. So proceeds from this event kicked off that program. We also worked with the Community School of Music. You'll see in a moment, we had kids that were part of that music school playing in the background of our event. It was really fantastic.
What they do is always first class, and they're seeing that here tonight. But what meant a lot to me was their reach out to our students, my students at Putnam Vocational Technical Academy and Culinary Arts. They have 5-star chefs, Chef Anthony and Chef Edmund, telling them, hey, you can do it. You can do it right here in Springfield, Massachusetts, or you can do it around the world. So MGM, #1, as Frank Sinatra used to say.
That's great.
It is with your help tonight that we're able to benefit 2 incredible organizations, and that is the Community Music School of Springfield, as well as the MGM Springfield Public Arts Program. We're kicking that off. And the Community Music School was also our entertainment for the evening. These talented students and instructors, and they're not done yet, they're going to perform for you again.
So the first 3 courses was definitely a huge collaboration. The mixed greens salad was sourced locally here in some of the different farms that Chef Ted did a great job in sourcing out.
All the kids from Putnam have been fantastic, and actually if they weren't here today, you guys would be starving because we would have never got it done without them.
We're all taught at some point of life that in giving, it's when we receive. This philosophy became the operating mantra for MGM Resorts under our very first chairman, Kirk Kokorian, and it continues in this generation with our leader, Jim Murrin. And here in Springfield, it will continue under the leadership of Mike Mathis.
One more final closing, which is to thank all of you, because I know I've been to these events. You got to get sitters, you got to rearrange your schedules, and the fact that you're all still here, it's getting a little cold, it's been a long night. Give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you so much.
So
It's great.
Looks like fun.
Yeah.
Tremendously proud of that event, and I think the star of that night was Court Square in downtown Springfield. We brought a couple of chefs, we brought some banquet tables, but very gratified. We heard some feedback from longtime residents who said, I've been here 40, 50 years. I walked through Court Square to get to jury duty. I walked past Court Square to get to the Mass Mutual from time to time, but I never stopped and enjoyed Court Square. So
Who were the invitees?
Yeah, we did a combination of personal invitations to our supporters, and we also did a public sale of tickets. So $125 per ticket, and we sold half of the 200 seats to the public at $125, which was a great show of support, and it benefited a good cause.
Great.
And that's what we're really good at, frankly, is doing creative things with food and entertainment, and that's just an example.
Great. Terrific.
And that'll be the first of many annual such downtown dinner projects.
We've been doing this for a couple of years, and I told Mike that was the very best night we've ever had in Springfield. I mean, it really showcased what the city can look like someday. It was fantastic.
Great.
So with that, I think we'll turn back to the monotony of permits. Can you bring up our 2-year schedule, please? Yeah. Is that the 2-year schedule? Yeah. So, yeah, great. So I just want to highlight a couple of things. This is a $800 million project, the largest project in Western Massachusetts. And as a result, I think there's a great amount of collaboration that needs to take place between the developer and between different agencies. We're aware of that, and I think Chuck has done a really good job with our development team breaking this up into different packages. One of the things that we did yesterday is we met with the Secretary Bielicki's Office of Housing and Economic Development and met with their permitting ombudsman to make sure that we were able to identify issues early and he can help us work across different agencies. It was one of those meetings where everybody was looking for a problem that didn't exist yet, and we said that's the way we wanted to kick off the relationship, is not in crisis mode, but to be proactive and make sure you understand what our work plan is. So that goes to the viaduct project, for example. We go to, I think the biggest opportunity for us is on building infrastructure in terms of vendors and suppliers. And I think this touches a little bit on the work that Commissioner Stebbins is doing with his vendor advisory group. But they know what their database is out there, and what we've committed to do is give them a gap analysis. Here are the types of goods and services we need. Here are the vendors that we've identified in the area. It won't surprise you, we're plenty good on alcohol and spirits in Western Mass. That we've got covered. Not so good on different professional services, for example, or some of the FF&E. So we'll identify those early and start working with whether it's Commissioner Stebbins or with Secretary Bielicki's office to trying to bridge that gap. And a lot of that takes some lead time. Chuck, maybe we can talk about where we are with MIPA. Just again, calling out a couple of the big items.
Yeah, I mean, last week or last month, I think we gave you a 4-month schedule with 60 line items. This one has 92, so we're going to just try to go through the treetops on these as quickly as possible. In the MIPA process, we are working toward this with the intent that we're going to be successful in November, and we are planning to, or hoping to, submit our FEIR prior to the vote, and just get that going. We had a full team session last week. Things are moving along very quickly. MGM is funding things as forcefully as they can, and we feel comfortable that we can probably get that submission done, which we're excited about to have completed.
Great.
Yeah, and just to put a finer point on it, we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars at risk to get the FEIR materials in a position that they can be submitted. I think this schedule shows them going in a week or two before the vote. We're confident about the vote, and we want to be ready to execute on our plan and get open as quickly as we can ahead of Wynn Resorts. So we're very focused on that, and I think the work plan demonstrates that, and all the activities we've been doing.
Yeah, and this chart is intensive, but Massachusetts is intensive. And what you're seeing here is the same chart that I would show you for development of any shopping center in Western Massachusetts, but for the vendor licensing and things like that. This chart is overwhelming because it probably is the largest development project in the history of Western Massachusetts. So with Chris's help and the city's help, as Mike said, we're looking at trying to package this in bite-sized pieces so we can go to agencies and say, let's engage now, let's really work on the parking garage, work on this utility, and process this as efficiently and gently as we can, because candidly, a lot of the resources are fairly strapped, and we can't just lay 1,000 pages on somebody's desk and expect approval in the next day.
Right.
I was remiss about, I'm going to ask Amy to bring one slide up. There's an event going on today that's really important. And you'll be pleased, it's a collaboration between two of your licensees, ourselves and Penn National. We put this together before the Boston selection, so this has been in the works for quite some time. But at this very moment, we've got a joint vendor information showcase going on at the DCU Center in Worcester. Again, very focused on Worcester because we think we're doing a good job in Western Mass with our vendors. I know Penn National feels like they're doing a good job in their area, and we really think that Worcester is such an important market that we're gonna force ourselves to host events in that area. So I think as of I checked in at lunch, we had 115 registrants come through as a snapshot, and they've been circulating throughout the day. So you got our booths, you've got the Penn National booths, and then you also have different workforce development partners, vendor groups that are also have booths there as well, different chambers, for example. So when we kick this all off, meaning start to develop the project, we don't believe we're just building infrastructure for our project. We believe we're building infrastructure for Western Mass. And as a result, it'll attract new businesses because of the investment that we'll all be making. So we'll continue to do events like this, but this is part of, again, building that database and that awareness to make sure that we've got good vendors in our system when we go to let all these goods and services out.
So let me just walk through the treetops here quickly, and this chart can be a tool as a baseline for you to ask us questions literally for the next year going forward. I promise you, all these line items will change and move, and it'll be very organic, but that's natural in any project. Starting at the federal level, we are blessed by having very little federal approval process in this project. We are going to drain water, runoff water into the river, so that's an approval that we have to get, but we're not concerned about that. At the state level, we have to get our MEPA permit. We have to get through the Historic Commission process, Department of Housing, and obviously we need the Gaming Commission's input on the plan and our design as we work through that process. At the city level, we have an overlay district, which is still in the approval process, but we're comfortable that that's going to be finished up. Within that process, there's a site plan review, which is a normal process, but we're not worried about that because obviously our plan was an attachment to the agreement with the city, so everybody knows what's coming forward from here. We have to get demolition permits for all the buildings. We have to do hazardous waste study on every single building before we can get those demo permits. Those permits come in one at a time. So those will be the first lead item. If I say, hey, I think we're going to do something in December, that means, well, we think we're going to probably have those buildings coming down in that time. We have to go into the streets and redesign the utility systems. You know, some we're going to have to cap, some we're going to have to redirect in other places, so we have to get the approval from the city to go in and do that. And then once we figure it all out, we have to get approval from the city to have a connection into those facilities. And this is, I'm just starting with the pre-construction approvals here. We have to get sewer and water permits. We need to get a highway access permit. We need a sewer connection permit. We have to work through Chris and the DPW to redesign the streets. Some streets we're abandoning. Some streets we're reconfiguring. And he's going to be really our guide as to how we do that most efficiently. We have to get curb cut permits, off-site roadwork permits. Within the building department, you know, typical construction permits. As we've indicated, we hope to do that in a phased process, coming out of the ground first with the parking garage, so we can get the courthouse employees as well as our construction workers inside our garage as quickly as possible. LEED certification is something that we've committed to on that project, so that's a box we're going to check as well. And we're still looking at all the options as to how we're going to achieve that goal, but we're comfortable that we're going to achieve everything we committed to. use and operation permits, vendor licensing, the daycare center, that has state requirements that we have to live up to. The elevator permits, fuel storage, alcohol, building department, we need to get certificates of occupancy. Hunter, sent us a note saying, don't commit to this thing on this schedule. We just want you to know this is a date that we think we're going to pull our certificates of occupancy. It could be pushed out a little bit. I mean, for example, if the viaduct is 30 days late, we may stutter step and be 30 days late with them because we need to have those two projects lined up perfectly. Fire department, health department, all of this is very standard. And what's great about Springfield is there really have been no surprises. We're not worried about this permitting process in any way at all in terms of achieving it and getting through it. Do I have concerns about how quickly some departments can take this giant process and put it through their system and say, go forward? Yeah, I do. And so that's something that I would recommend as you're looking this, that would be a question I would ask is, how long do you expect that sewer and water permit? Where are you getting that highway access permit? What's the timing? Every department in the state works differently, and I would expect different timelines on all of them. At the city level, I think Chris can speak to this better than I can, but I think the city is going to be our partner on this. And in any way, your team is going to try to expedite this with thorough diligence. You're not going to give us a free pass.
Not a free pass. But one of the things that we've really been happy about is that, as Chuck says, there's been no surprises from his side thinking about the city and from our side thinking about MGM. We deal with developers all the time that we talk about preliminary plans and preliminary layouts and, kind of give them an idea that, yes, this is the direction we want to go in. And then all of a sudden they show up with a plan and says, well, if we decide to move the building here, the entrance is going to be over here. Their plan has stayed basically the way that it has been proposed from day one. So our review, nothing has changed. All we ever do, really, from a standpoint of working with MGM and with Chuck, is confirming that it's still the way that it is, and nothing has changed. So our approach to what we need to do and what we're expecting to see on plans really just gets into a little bit more detail every time, and we haven't had to go back and rethink anything about roads, about intersections, about access, things like that. So as a city, we're extremely comfortable with where it is right now, and as long as it keeps going on that path, I think the process is going to work very, very well in the city.
Great.
Great. I think I'd just say in closing, again, any questions you have, one of the commitments we made in the host community agreement with Mayor Sarno was to fund a dedicated position, essentially a city version of an ombudsman, to help shepherd some of these permits, because we recognize that staffing up for the type of permitting review that it'll take to review our project isn't something that necessarily makes sense on a long-term basis. You don't hire all those positions because there's not another $800 million project coming down the road. So we've prepared for that, and we'll work with them to create some dedicated positions, sort of as a one-off, to help shepherd this process. So can't thank Chris enough for all of his support for schlepping out from Western Mass to be here with us this morning. But it really speaks to the kind of collaboration we have with the city. They're our partners, as is the Commonwealth, once we get this open.
And one thing I'd like to really emphasize, and this is coming from a local developer perspective, the money MGM invested into the entitlement process starting 2 years ago is why we're in such a comfort zone right now. They have allowed us to put together a Massachusetts-based development team like Ginsler and Tech and Brown Rudnick that are here today, and I think it's the best team I've ever seen working together in Massachusetts. And through that process, there's not an agency in the state that we have to work with that isn't now familiar with this team and is ready to engage right after November.
That's great.
Yep.
Sounds terrific.
That's all wonderful to hear.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other comments,
No,
questions?
it's
Just a quick question, and Chris, we need to better coordinate our travel schedules. I noticed you're going back into some meetings with the Springfield Historical Commission, and obviously the fate of several of the historical properties are key. And on your schedule, you had a meeting last week. Just quickly, how did that go? And obviously it's an ongoing thing, but Any thoughts or comments from the meeting last week?
What we're doing in the historic meetings are taking one building at a time right now, because we think they all deserve that level of attention. So last week's meeting was regarding how we move the church down the street and keep it in the condition that we want it to be in. So there was really no new information. It was a collaborative process talking about the church relocating down toward Union Street, and the timing and the execution, which, you know, in our meeting with you last month, we talked about and said, hey, you know, this is going to be an interesting project to move this church.
And just one thing I wanted to add on that, Bruce, our interaction with somebody like Bob McCarroll, et cetera, is, has the plan changed any from the city's perspective, as I just mentioned before? And the answer is no, so that on their side, there's continue to be no surprises. They're obviously talking about the historical standpoint. Is there anything else in the plan that is changing that they need to kind of be aware of as we're moving through the process? And at this point, nothing new needs to come to their attention from our side, as long as you know, and I'm assuming it's going to continue that way.
That's great.
So every month, I expect before we meet with you, we're going to have had another meeting with the Historic Commission, and right now, we're working on which building we're going to discuss next month, and we'll come in with a report on that as well.
That's great.
And I think that's it for our update. You know, I think the importance of the work we're doing, and I'll close with this interesting tidbit about the church. The dynamic with the First Spiritual Church is that it's in the center of our site, so it needs to be relocated. We've talked to you about plans to incorporate that into our child care center. But the interesting sequence issue is that in order to create the foundation for its final home, which is a farther out need and a farther out timeline, what we're going to do is lift the church, park it somewhere, which will be incredible. I think I'm going to ask our guys to make that a Discovery Channel special. Park it somewhere temporarily to get it off the site, and then prep the pad for where it will land. And that's the level of detail that we're getting into now. You wouldn't want to discover that the day you start breaking ground, that you have nowhere to park the church. So those are the kinds of things that we're starting to work on, and it's the exciting part of development that we're happy to challenge with a really talented team. So we'll continue to give you those types of updates, but feel confident that we're on top of it and that we're excited to get this project open.
Well, I want to see the Discovery Channel film. Is the
I want to go to the next dinner.
Yeah, yeah, that too.
That's why you're asking about the invite. I'm sorry. I think I snubbed the commission on the invite. That probably wasn't too smart.
I don't want to get into that.
Right.
I'm fascinated by this church thing. So, yeah. By lots of pieces of this, but that's one of them.
We'll give you a time. I mean,
we're going to know when it's.
We're going to bring
we'll bring you out
lawn
to
chairs
see
and
it.
watch
Exactly.
We'll
It'll be
have a
fascinating.
meeting
For the
Western
week.
Mass that week. Right. Anything we can do on your behalf?
As far as we're concerned, John Zamba and your staff have been fantastic. In fact, we gave him a couple of issues to help us with, and just in terms of communication.
Right.
And we're working really well together. So we'll let you know, certainly. But no, thank you for your support.
We're meeting with Rick and John very regularly, and as Mike said, they've been incredibly proactive. So we're very grateful for that.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
It's always a parking issue, huh? Even for the
No, it
church.
seems like they solved it.
Parking, yeah. He meant parking the church.
Oh, parking
It's
the
always
church.
parking, he
All right.
says.
It's always parking, even.
Do you have other things, Ombudsman?
That's the report, unless you
Okay.
have any questions.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much.
Let's quickly move to legal. Thank you, folks. Item number 7, General Counsel Blue.
So you have in your packet today 2 amended small business impact statements and the final versions of the vendor secondary licensing and the gaming school regulations. We had our public hearing on the regulations on September the 4th. And with your approval of both the amended small business impact statements and the final versions, we will submit these for filing, and they should be through the process.
Are there any questions about those?
questions.
Do we
Looks
want to
good.
go straight to a motion? Who would that be? Commissioner Stebbins?
Okay, hang on a second.
Yep. Take your time.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the commission approve the small business impact statements as soon as I can find them. Not as good as the judge at this.
No one is.
Hey, no.
Finger doesn't move
I
fast
can
enough.
get lost just as easy as... There's a lot of stuff in this package.
Sorry.
No problem. Maybe
I think it's on...
Catherine can just list the names of the
It is the
numbers.
102, Bruce, page 102.
102.
102. Okay. Approve the small business impact statement for the proposed amendments in 205 CMR 134 licensing, and the small business impact statement for new regulations in 205 CMR 137 gaming schools, and the associated regulations.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you.
Next. I thought you had a,
You covered the regulations in the same motion.
They did the...
oh, we did them all?
combined.
Oh, okay.
Combine them.
Oh, sorry. Glad I voted for it. So
Catherine
we are,
didn't tell me I couldn't.
so are we on to research and problem gambling?
Right.
Yeah, okay, good. This is the last item on our agenda, I believe, today.
Right.
I wasn't expecting it so soon.
Right, neither did I.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Mark.
I'm bringing back before you the responsible gaming framework for your consideration. Before I begin, just real quickly, the purpose of the framework. The responsible gaming framework is intended to provide guidance for the Gaming Commission in terms of responsible gaming regulations that we will ultimately end up adopting. It's also intended to provide just a general orientation for for the Commission as well as our licensees on responsible gaming practices. The framework has been before you many times before and has gone through many different versions. I think I started, but it really began back in October of last year when we kicked it off with a forum on responsible gaming. From there, I worked closely with Massachusetts Council on Compulsive Gaming, Massachusetts Council on Compulsive Gambling, as well as Problem Gambling Solutions and the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. That version the first version came to you in March, followed by a second version in May, then July, and here we are today. There's many different, there's been many changes in this version, in large part based on the feedback that you had provided in July. But it also took into consideration further support and information provided by the Department of Public Health, also the Massachusetts Public Health Association. And I think that what you have before you is a much stronger document as a result. So with that, I don't know how you want to kick off this conversation. I'm open to any additional feedback you may have and any discussion you may have as well.
My suggestion would be that you just walk through the major issues, and we, as you say, we've all been through it several times, so we're pretty familiar with the evolving document. But where there are major issues that you think we ought to be highlighted both for us and for the public record, let's do that.
Okay. I would start off with the introduction on page 3. Within the introduction, there was some question at the last time that I presented it to you. What is the true intention? What is the purpose of the framework? I felt like we we addressed it, but it was further down in the document, so I put it front and center. And you can see the first two sentences under the introduction. It, I think, clearly describes what the purpose of the framework is. I'd also like to point out the definition of problem gambling. I put a slightly more general definition of problem gambling, whereas before we indicated or brought up time and money spent. Really, I think a broader definition is better, where we state that problem gambling is characterized by gambling behavior which leads to a continuum of adverse consequences for the gambler, others, and the community.
Great.
All right. There wasn't
Well,
much.
it's also important in that introduction, the second paragraph is also important. We're going to have regulations that will contain a list of do's and don'ts and musts and mustn'ts. But it's also important to understand overall that this is a policy that the Commission puts its full weight behind, so that there's ambiguities or intersections in the regulations, that this kind of thing supplies the philosophy that the Commission has got its back behind. And I think the second paragraph is a very useful one, as well as the first. It's all useful, but I just wanted to give a shout out for the second paragraph.
Great, thank you.
Got it.
You know, I think the intent of a framework to me is this is a really complex issue, and thoughtfully addressing this is what's going to make a true impact. And it doesn't come with just one strategy. It doesn't come with just one measure. It comes with a framework, and there are probably 50 plus different measures that we identify in here. And I think it's with that thoughtfulness that spans all the way from primary prevention and basic education all the way through much more intensive types of intervention recommendations that provides that type of more of a public health safety net that we're looking for, that I think fits within the mission of what the Commission is trying to do, and ultimately ends up meeting what the original intent of the authorizing legislation was. So I agree, Commissioner. I would like to move all the way to strategy 2. There are a couple different things that I would like to point out in strategy 2. First, under 2.1, informed decision making. During the last meeting, there was question and concern expressed around looking at the different types of gamblers, the casual gambler, the frequent gambler, and the intensive gambler, and specifically assigning frequency, or how often somebody would be gambling within this, when much like the definition of problem gambling, you can't necessarily tie it to a specific frequency or tie it to a specific amount spent. So to I think, recognize that, we just simply took out the frequency in there, but I think that the rest of the definition fit it quite well.
Yeah, there's not a negative connotation here. It's all positive and constructive and tools, so I think this reads really well, and it's not assigning blame. It's really giving you tools to understand the issues and to address them as need be. So I think this reads really well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and it's not a one-size-fits-all, which is part of the, or three-size-fits-all, which is part of the point you're making, Mark, relative to how difficult it is to deal with a variety of individuals with many different circumstances and backgrounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. The 2.2, play information and management systems. This is the one piece that, in my mind, remains a controversial issue that many of our licensees have a problem with, and they have or expressed some concern about. Informed decision-making and management systems basically look at what types of tools can we give players to help them make more informed decisions about their play behavior. And it moves it from just simply providing some information about responsible gaming, for example, saying, set a budget and stick with it, to providing real-time tools for people who want to use those. If you want to say, I want to spend $50, when you go into the casino, you would have the ability to set that to your player card. And when $50 is spent, if you're at a slot machine, then it provides notifications and reminders that you've spent $50. The concern, I think, from our licensees has been, one is how effective is this? What does the evidence show that says that this is effective? Two, how much does it cost to implement such features at the casino? Third is, what are the considerations in terms of implementing this, of rolling this into their existing systems? So with that, I want to take all of their questions, all of their concerns seriously. We decided to enlist the help of a consultant or consultant group to take a look at all of these concerns. Their process was to do a thorough literature review on what do we know about play management features, or more specifically pre-commitment features that would be connected to player cards. We took it a step further and have been in a process of interviewing in other jurisdictions, and in fact 9 other jurisdictions, gaming regulators, gaming operators, machine manufacturers, and other government officials about what their experience has been with these types of features. To land on I think, provide you all with a very solid understanding of what are the advantages of this, but also, and more importantly, I think, to answer some of the concerns about it, what are the problems with it? I'm sorry to say I don't have a final report for that to you right now. I can report that they are in the process of wrapping up their data collection, and the preliminary recommendation is for the commission, for the commissioners, for you all to adopt such features. I think that how we implement that is probably as important as if we implement it, because in their experience in talking with these individuals from 9 other jurisdictions that have used these, how you do it is incredibly important. I think that a lot of the concerns that have come up in other jurisdictions is what is the rate of uptake? How many people actually use this in order for it to be worth the cost of it? What's the cost to benefit ratio here? And so I think that what we'll see in the final report is a number of recommendations regarding how to encourage uptake of these tools. Another is...
The final report from the consultants?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Another important key feature or factor that I think that we'll end up seeing here, and that they've let me know just in their preliminary findings, is how do you implement it in a way to maximize the effectiveness of these tools, so that it really is something. If you have a lot of people using it, how do you make sure that it's being used appropriately and for the right reasons to help people set a budget of time and/or money and stick with that? So at this point, what I have in the framework is a statement that the MGC will investigate the feasibility, including cost, available technology, and the effectiveness of incorporating play information and management systems into the development of regulations. I state what those features are, but I would say that at this point, I would recommend that we keep that language in there. We are certainly on track to gather that information, and I should be able to provide that to you soon.
What is your schedule for that? When do you expect to get the report at a point where you will want to distribute it?
I would give it probably another 30 days before
30
I would
days.
have before I would have that final report.
Okay. Okay.
A key provision of this is in the first sentence of 2.2. It seems to me that this is voluntary. People can be encouraged to do it, but this is not going to be something that's mandatory or required. The approach is a voluntary, giving people the tools they want to use voluntarily.
Correct.
There has been a lot of misunderstanding about the word voluntary, though, and yes, you're absolutely right, and that's one of the places where there's been a misunderstanding. But it would not be voluntary for the licensees to offer it. That is.
No, I understand.
I know.
I understand.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But there's been
what other misunderstanding about voluntary has there been?
Well, originally it was misunderstanding about whether people would be required to participate. Individuals would be required to participate in the program. That's what the
Sounds like
industry.
voluntary to me.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, misunderstanding of voluntary. No, there was a misunderstanding that it was not voluntary, right, sorry. But there's two levels of voluntary. One is the individual participating, and the other is the industry participating. And if we were to do this, we would mandate that the industry offers it as a voluntary option to the employees.
As a voluntary option,
Yeah,
right.
right.
Right. So then the cost piece has I can understand the cost piece. I have to be persuaded of what the other problems are.
And there's even I think there's something we need to explore is the role of the Commission offering certain of these tools without necessarily the full participation of the licensees. I have some ideas, but this goes back to the feasibility.
Well, I think what's important is this language does not lock us into anything. It's an exploration, continue to evaluate and gather information, so.
Actually, you could call it a placeholder.
We could call it a placeholder?
Yeah, and I think I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I think that language makes it clear that there is no final decision here.
Yeah.
And we have to, and are going to, I know, continue to work with the licensees and get their thoughts about feasibility, implementation, all this other stuff.
Correct.
To make this work and to test it.
Yeah, I think actually that last point is very important, that we are looking at pre-commitment tools on gaming machines is not something that's been done in the U.S. before. It's been done in a number of other jurisdictions. And we're certainly gathering all the information about what worked and what didn't work and what the recommendations are if we should adopt this of how we should proceed. With that said, I think it's ultimately important that we have a rigorous evaluation process in place here. This fits with our overall orientation. We want to adopt practices that are tested, that are identified best practices in responsible gaming. The downfall of that is that there really aren't that many out there. And so with that, in the absence of that sort of best practice approach, we're taking a precautionary approach. And this would be an example of a precautionary approach where we say, you know what, there is great potential in offering tools like this to help individuals gamble responsibly. But because it isn't some type of tried and true practice, we may, or you all may choose to move forward with this, but we're going to rigorously evaluate the effectiveness and decide whether we continue as is, whether we change that and offer it in a slightly different way, or whether we abandon ship.
Right. Right.
Great.
Okay. Another key feature within the framework, and this is actually was envisioned within the authorizing legislation, is under 2.3, the Responsible Gaming Information Centers. And this is an area that I have to say I'm incredibly excited about what the potential of these on-site spaces are. I'm incredibly encouraged also in talking most specifically and recently with Penn about what their vision is and where they had proposed that this space is placed within their facility in an area where there is a high amount of traffic coming by to gain a lot of visibility, but at the same time that it's large enough that there would be private space that if there is a sensitive situation that needs to be dealt with, that we can do that within that space. So I look forward to working with our licensees to further kind of iron out what this looks like and how it's used.
Yesterday, we actually toured the Penn site and saw right where the responsible gaming space will be, right at the front door. It's great.
Yeah, it's in a space actually where, as they've said, about 2/3 of the patrons coming through will walk by that space.
Great.
Moving to 3.6 under the strategy of providing protections within the physical environment. I had a number of recommendations come from the Massachusetts Public Health Association, and one that fit, I felt like, under the encouraging breaks in play, which was to display clocks in prominent locations in the gaming area to help patrons track the passage of time. This is something that has been tried in other jurisdictions. It's something that hasn't gotten a lot of attention in terms of how well it's been evaluated. I felt like that it was a recommendation coming from the Public Health Association. I think that it fits well within a broader strategy of helping encouraging breaks in play, and so I put that in there. Okay. Under Strategy 4, there were 4 additional recommendations that I have for practices in casino gambling and advertising. Under 4.2, generally the advertising does not encourage people to play beyond their means, imply the certainty of reward, exaggerate the chances of winning, or encouraging excessive or irresponsible play.
Some of these may be hard to evaluate. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. Evaluation is going to be key in many different measures. Some of them we will spend a lot more time and energy setting up a rigorous evaluation protocol than for others. Some of them, for example, the 4 additional ones that I placed in there were adopted from a jurisdiction in Australia that had those as advertising guidelines there. Moving to Strategy 5, managing high-risk financial transactions. This is while it hasn't changed since the last iteration, I would like to just highlight the fact that there was a lot of input from the licensees, specifically through the Mass Partnership for Responsible Gaming, to come up with, I think, recommendations for house credit that truly that have a lot of potential.
Yeah, and I think those health, this didn't change from the last iteration?
No, they did not.
Well, it did change substantially from the first one. This is a much more functional, sensible, and I think effective way of dealing with this. I think this is really good, the way it is now. It permits the extension of credit to the people who really want a lot of credit simply to move money from one place to another, and at the same time has safeguards built in so that people aren't going beyond their means. I think it's very well thought out.
Great, thank you. Moving to Strategy 6, there were a number of small changes to Strategy 6 that came from recommendations from the Mass Council on Compulsive Gambling as well as Department of Public Health. That I think that they're all very good, and specifically Steve Keel and Marlene Warner from those two organizations are here, and I think to offer their support. What I like about it is it remains relatively general, but it also sets it up that it allows us to expand this over time as we get more information about what are effective ways that we can encourage our operators to work within the community and engage within the community. In general, what I would love to see is that they are members of the community, and I've seen nothing but nothing to that contrary. MGM was a perfect example of how they are from the onset engaging with their community. Their presentation was fantastic, and I look to continue that, and I think that Strategy 6 kind of sets that up. Okay, that actually kind of covers the main substantial changes from the last version of this document.
Any thoughts, others, questions?
No, I think this is really good. It sets out a set of principles. It sets out a set of principles at a level of specificity that carries some focus forward, but at a level of generality that leaves us leeway to issue regulations without having to change this, and also provides a framework for flexibility as we move downstream and begin to actually get data and see what's going on, and enlist the support of our licensees, knowing what our target is in helping us achieve it if whatever specific regulatory strategy we're using doesn't seem to be working quite the way we'd like. So I think it's really a good thing to have, and it's now, and the way that it's been put together with engaging the licensed community, the public health community, the compulsive gambling community, I think this is really a great step forward and a really important one for us and for this new thing in Massachusetts. So it's great.
Thank you.
I agree. I had a chance to visit with Mark earlier in the week and talk through this, and my biggest concern was that this is a living document that we can kind of keep coming back to as strategies change or strategies are proven not to be as successful as we hoped. It can be reflected ultimately here and then ultimately in regulations, but I think it's well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, I echo that. The adjustments, changes are right on and really make it a workable, practical document. Well done.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight one thing that I don't think that I've ever really stated, but that I felt like was important in considering any of the strategies or measures in here, is that we have this great potential to put and promote responsible gaming here. That before somebody would cross that line to problem gambling, we can provide tools, information to encourage people to gamble responsibly, that they wouldn't cross that line and experience the negative consequences, at times devastating consequences of what problem gambling does. It doesn't say that we don't prioritize that. There doesn't need to be specific and intentional strategies for that, but I think that what I really want in this document is that we can promote gambling or gaming in a way in which people can do it as it's intended, as a form of recreation, as entertainment, and something that they can afford. It's really important.
I agree.
Yeah, no, just to, say a similar thing for the record, that I think this effort has been really great. Perhaps, quite a few months in the making, but I think a great testament to what's really in our mission, which is to be participatory, engage the licensees, other stakeholders like DPH and the council. I think your approach, you've led this approach of a lot of thoughtful research, really understanding what's out there available and what's not. And a testament to that is also that, as Commissioner Stebbins is saying, this will continue to be a living document, would evolve into regulations in some fashions. Strategies will remain the same, some might evolve. But I just think overall it's a great product.
Thank you.
You mentioned 30 days before the report is ready. So I know you're tracking this, but just to reiterate, if we did end up requiring that our first licensee, Penn National, did have to install some kind of a personal management module on their slots machines, they would need to know that when, and are we on the track to hit that deadline?
Okay, I will follow up with Penn, obviously, since they're well in advance of the other licensees. I'll communicate directly with Penn and make sure that we are meeting their marks as well.
Okay. I mean, if we're going to do this, and we don't know yet whether we are or not, but we'd want to do it in as timely a fashion as possible to get it into their pipeline and at the least expense and inconvenience as possible.
Correct.
Okay. Do we have anything else?
Are we going to approve this? Is this on for a vote?
Yes, it is.
Oh, it is? Okay. Sorry. Commissioner Zuniga, you've been pretty heavily involved in this.
Sure. I would move that this commission approve the responsible gaming framework as presented and discussed here in its last iteration, as labeled here, version 1, presented on September 23rd.
Second?
Second.
Any further discussion? I would certainly add my appreciation to this. You know, I know how hard you've worked on this, and I know the style with which you've approached it. You've gone out of your way to have this be a process in which you really listen to people. You think hard about your own assumptions and their assumptions. So I would just echo what everybody else has said. This is a good document, and I'm proud to have it be a part of our operation.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have the responsible gaming framework recommendations adopted in a unanimous vote. I have one other thing before we adjourn. I am alerted to the fact that we are about to lose one of our team members, Tom, from Pixis, who's been with us. Stand up, take a wave.
Tom. What? Tom, you going to take all your machines with you, too?
Tom is, I'm told, has been hired to go to work at Liberty Mutual. From Pixis, so we hope you'll leave good folks behind, but it's been a great operation.
Really has.
It really
It's
has.
been
It's just
terrific.
almost worked flawlessly. And I know we've asked a lot of you folks, and you've always really responded, clip, 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 so it's been great.
It's been really great, yeah, really great.
Good luck in your next phase.
Congrats.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.